106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
Good evening, Chicago, and welcome to the Friday night edition of Chicago Corner. Sorry we got a little bit of a late start. I'm noticing all the demand in our live chat, especially from Kathy Powers, who's telling us to drop the, the corny beef and let's go. Some things are worth waiting for, Kathy. And it's really, really good, though, to know how appreciated we are by our audience. Welcome to our Friday night edition. We have a lot of news to cover tonight. It's been a big week as far as endorsements go, and we'll get into talking about that. But before we go forward, yes, I want to welcome my partner in crime here, Mr. Edward Heller. Cheers.
Good evening, everyone. Kathy, I already had my corned beef sandwich earlier in the evening, but now it is time for a lovely beverage on this St. Patrick's Day and Lou Malnati's birthday.
Yes, I used to work for Lou Malnati, so I'm glad you dug up that story. We'll talk. Well, let's get that over with in the front of the show. It's their birthday, because we have a lot more to talk about, and since you brought it up, may as well tip our hats to them.
Yeah, it's a short story. When Lou Malnati, son of Rudy Malnati, who used to work at the original Pizzeria Uno, decided to strike out on his own, he opened his first deep dish pizza restaurant, Lou Malnati's Pizzeria, in Lincolnwood, Illinois, on March 17th, 1971, St. Patrick's Day. So every St. Patrick's Day is a birthday for Lou Malnati's Pizzeria.
And of course, I'm very, very glad that Ed had that history, because even though I worked for the company, I was a delivery driver when I was in college up out of the Wilmette location. Good family to work for, good business, delicious pizza. I still often order from them when I'm up in Wilmette visiting my nephews and my family, my sister. So we wish them the best, even though they're not formal sponsors of the show. We endorse them anyway.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get them as a sponsor someday.
It would. Someday.
Wishful Someday. I'm going to be positive on that one, because I got a whole website dedicated to deep dish. So, I mean, we got that going for us.
That's true. Let me really quickly check something here and of course, on cue, literally on cue, as I am firing up the show and resetting my browser and stuff, you know who's here. He's all over stuff. So I'm just trying to juggle what I need to do here. First of all, I want to thank our very, very generous Patreon supporters. First and foremost, I want to mention Mr. Dominic Palella, who not only is a frequent contributor to the show, and not only did he join our Patreon page and support us there, but Dominic was very, very generous last year with a big donation to Chicago Corner, which helped us fund and run our operations, especially when it came to Christmas time. We wanted to promote and market our food drive that kind of started over here on Chicago Corner to unite the community. So we want to thank Dominic Palella. We want to thank always Queen Kathy Powers, who is also a frequent contributor to our show in the live chat. Also want to thank Shane Coughlin from Kerberos Media in New York, who has been very, very gracious in helping provide a larger audience for Chicago Corner on a national scope. And we also want to thank Mr. Johnny Lucasio, who is Joy Logalbo's campaign manager, and who saw the value in our program and what we bring to Chicago when we had Johnny come on and talk about the issues with filing petitions and the inequities across candidates. And lastly, did I miss any of our Patreon supporters? Oh, Dr. Howard Ehrman from the People's Response Network, who also saw value in a Chicago Corner live streaming their People's Response Mayoral Forum last month, which we were very, very proud to be a part of and helping give some time to the candidates at the Ames Cathedral regarding the primary at that time, which has now come down to two candidates, two choices, Brandon Johnson and Paul Vallas, who we're going to be talking about tonight, especially in regard to endorsements and other news surrounding the upcoming runoff election. So, Ed, anything you want to share before we dive into it?
No, nothing more to share. Let's just jump into it.
Yeah. Also, want to welcome in the live chat. I see Miguel H. Virund DB, constitutional conservative as always. Yeah. Yes. Arturo Medina, thank you. That's not a big endorsement. That's not as great an endorsement as you think it is, constitutional conservative. Let's also see who else is here. Of course, Kathy Powers. As I'm scrolling through here, Extra Bola, Warren, welcome. Good to see you. So those are a lot of our loyal viewers who are always here contributing to the show. Let's bring up the first story in regards to our show headline. That we're seeing that the grown-ups are making the endorsements now this week. A moment here to bring up the window. Here we go. Big news, big news. Chewy the Stash Garcia. Obviously, everybody's seen this on local media stations. But Chewy the Stash Garcia has done the right thing in supporting former Commissioner Brandon Johnson. So let's quickly read the update from the Chicago Sun-Times. Chewy Garcia endorses ex-rival Brandon Johnson for mayor, aiming to lock down progressive vote against Paul Vallas. Fantastic. Chewy, good thing you stepped up. I hope you can do your job in Washington as you ran for Congress and bring the funds to Chicago, Cook County, and Illinois that are sorely needed and will especially be sorely needed if Paul Vallas wins this election and decides to carve up the city and make sure all that money goes to his rich crony buddies.
It's a good endorsement for his base, Jerry, because I mean,
speculatively in the charter school industry is how I wanted to finish my sentence.
Well, then we saw a lot of people in the Democratic Party starting to line up behind Brandon. I know James Clyburn in Congress endorsed him recently. Maybe that was enough to shame Chewy into finally making a decision whether he was going to endorse or not. And since Brandon essentially has a lot of the same values that Chewy claimed he had during his campaign, during all of his campaigns.
Absolutely.
It's really a no-brainer here. And I think he said as much in the video. I have the video ready whenever you want to play it.
Yeah, actually, why don't you run the video? Because apparently I have the wrong screen. I've got my reading screen that I'm going to scroll through. I don't actually have why don't you go ahead and run the video, Ed?
Okay.
Tanya and Terrell, Brandon Johnson picking up a big endorsement this morning. The announcement made right here in the Little Village neighborhood. Former mayoral candidate Jesus Chewy Garcia throwing his support behind Johnson, surrounded by several Hispanic leaders and elected officials at La Velita Community Church. The U.S. congressman who finished fourth in the February runoff is giving the Cook County commissioner a potential boost when it comes to Latinos who live on the Southwest Side and liberals who live on the lakefront. The former rivals coming together to unite and close ranks in the progressive movement.
Community development is at the center of everything that we want to do, investment in those communities, and we think that improves the quality of life in every aspect, in public safety, in housing, in education, and all the things that everyone in every neighborhood wants.
We are running on this movement to give our people a guarantee, because that's what our people organized for, that's what our people fought for, and that's the dream that we're going to live. April 4th, Black and Brown community is about to be lit in Chicago.
Can you pause it for a moment, Ed?
Yeah.
I'm really, really glad he focused on organizing and worker rights. Just wanted to punctuate that, because that is a huge issue for all Chicagoans, especially those in unions who are constantly vilified. Teachers make too much. This union makes too much. That union makes too much. Oh, Paul Vallas, Palos Paul is coming into Chicago and carving it up to suit his privatization buddies at the expense and sacrifice of so many of the people who do the hard work and share and basically carry the lion's share of the tax burden load, supporting things and not really getting enough back. Because as you know,
go ahead. Jerry.
No, go ahead.
I would just wanted to say because a lot of times we will hear this thing that that the unions have too much power, and it's a false equivalency compared to the corporate influences on these elections. And a lot of them are leaning on Paul Vallas to basically get every little piece of Chicago that they can control or privatize. And the teachers, they may have some leverage here and there, but they don't have that kind of power. So it's a little disingenuous to tell everybody that you should fear the power of a teachers union getting the ear of the next incoming mayor.
Or any union.
Yeah.
That's taken for granted. Any workforce of people that are taken for granted. So, so that was a fantastic endorsement. And although I had the Tribune article up, where did that video come from? NBC5?
That was an ABC 7.
ABC. All right. ABC 7. I guess I can, I'm just like trying to balance my windows without suddenly having major memory issues here, not having too many windows open up. I'll go to the Blog Club Chicago coverage, though.
Okay.
That goes into a little bit more detail. If that window will come up, please. Thank you. And as I wait for it to load on my reader window, how's everybody doing tonight in the live chat? I'm seeing a lot of comments about all these endorsements. So Kathy Powers shares that Chewy, let's see here, Chewy ate to the party Garcia endorses. So did Cam Buckner, and we are going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Kathy asks if the Grand Wizard endorsed Palos Paul. All right.
Well, we could look that up, but I don't know if he really cares about this race.
Yeah. All right. Let me get my reader screen ready here. All right. So this comes from...
And I don't think she's asking about Gandalf.
No, definitely not. Darn, why do these windows take so... because I've got 3 Chrome windows up to run our
It's the gremlins, Jerry.
They're always in my
computer. Wing Spiracy gremlins.
Yeah, even though I rebooted everything ahead of time.
What do we have going? I mean, plus we got a lot of ghosts in the machine these days.
Yeah.
Like we got the ghost cow, and we got that guy who was finally vindicated, who used to take care of the O'Leary's cows. They were innocent too, it turns out, which was amazing news to find out several episodes back. I have a feeling this guy is floating around us too. And so, with all that ethereal energy flying back and forth, I think it might be messing with the live stream and the computer stuff.
We can only hope. Constitutional Conservative says Illinois got $45 billion from Sleepy Joe for COVID-19 in 2022. Where did all that money go, and how much more billions does Illinois need to steal? Keep voting one party. Here's the interesting disconnect that I always discuss with Constitutional Conservative, Ed, and I think we have too. This isn't about party. This is a class war.
Yeah.
Because both parties serve the same masters, the same donors. I don't see Johnson so much a Democrat as I see a progressive, more of an outside progressive. And although Garcia is part of the Democrat machine to keep those progressive credentials in place, he has to support Johnson, because you know what? I haven't seen the Democrats step up and support labor or unions for since Clinton came into office.
They give unions lip service these days.
Yes. All right.
Yeah, for the most part.
Pretty much. All right, so I've got the article queued up here from Block.
Also, I mean, is Lou going to completely ignore police overtime? I wasn't going to bring it up, but since he's asking, that's where some of that money went.
That's where 70% of the COVID relief funds went. And that was reported. 70% of federal COVID funds that were supposed to help Chicago went to police.
Here's the disconnected logic. So because the overtime happened while Lightfoot was mayor, it's a Democrat problem, not a Republican problem. True. Guys, it's a duopoly. They're working together. You guys just don't see it.
You've been brainwashed into being divided against each other. We shouldn't even be discussing the parties. We should be discussing how can we all put the R and the D aside and come together and protect and advocate for ourselves, not the rich 1%ers that we believe Palos Paul is going to cater to, who are getting the lion's share of socialism in this country, and the tax cuts and the benefits and the free handouts like well, not free, but the sweetheart deals like the CHA land give to the Chicago Fire for a fucking training field. Okay? Art asks in the chat, isn't it safe to say money has been stolen? Yeah, possibly. Sure. That factors into it.
Yeah. I mean, we could... it's essentially what it is, at least on the federal level. You got to look as it not as tax dollars, but as public money. The people, because they are supposed to be represented by these people in DC, it's our money. It's not money funded by taxes. It's public money, which means that they are still accountable to us for what they prioritize that spending on. It's just not required for us to spend money into the system to fund that mechanism. They can decide to make those payments for anything that they feel they need to distribute money for any government program, distribute to any amount of money to the states for anything that they want to support. And it's not, and you guys want to, worry about inflation and stuff. It's not that simple. It's not just if we give all the workers more money that, inflation's going to get out of hand. There's only one. I mean, we're having funds and more demand is only part of the equation for inflation. You have to take into account corporate profits, greed, price gouging, supply chain issues, any number of things that could be affecting why the supply and demand are causing an inflationary reaction. And that was our economy moment for Chicago Corner for this evening.
Thank you, Kathy. I vote for people, not parties. Now, this is interesting. Constitutional conservative claims, yeah, the 70% of COVID funds to police overtime was to offset the previous year of defunding the police.
No.
The police were not defunded the previous year.
They've never been defunded.
Lori Lightfoot is shoveling money to the police. And he also asks, why do we call him Palos Paul? Vlaka, and if you're Greek, you'll know what that means. Are you kidding me? Why do we call him Palos Paul? That's where he pays his taxes, constitutional conservative. That's where he has his homestead exemption. Before, he rented the bachelor pad in Bridgeport while he's left his wife to take care of his... Is it his father, his parents, or her parents? It's her in-laws.
I don't remember. Anyway, I should also clarify for people who are wondering, okay? Federal taxes work differently than state and local taxes. So your local taxes, like if you're living in Chicago and you're paying Chicago taxes, those actually do go toward funding and paying for things, because the states and the cities are currency users. The federal government is the currency issuer. So that's the difference between the different types of taxation and how you can pay for things. So states and cities have to wonder how to pay for stuff. The federal government never does.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed the true brains of the show. Thank you, because I had no understanding to any of that, and I'm very, very grateful for Ed's insight that way, because I didn't know that, and so many people do have a disconnect or misunderstanding about how all that works.
Yeah, if you're wanting to read more about that, there's a great book by Stephanie Kelton. She's an economist, and it's called The Deficit Myth. I don't get any money for telling you about this. I just think it's a book that will help you wrap your head around how federal spending works, how half of Congress doesn't know how federal spending works, and the other half is hoping you don't know.
True. Constitutional conservative. No, Ed, it's tax dollars taken from those of us who pay taxes. But are you getting anything back for your taxes, Lou? That's not just going to the police department while crime doesn't go down. If overfunding the police was the solution to crime, Chicago would be the safest city, not just in the country, but in the world. Okay.
Yeah. So again, Lou, federal taxes are different from state and local taxes. Federal taxes, they give the dollar value because you can only pay federal taxes in US dollars and no other kind of currency. Without getting too deep into the weeds, that's it in a nutshell.
All right, let's get to the Block Club Chicago article on the endorsement, though. This comes to us from Quinn Myers at Block Club, Representative Jesus the Stash Garcia, Jesse Jackson. That should look, I would think that the endorsement from Jesse Jackson should offset any other claptrap from anybody else that might be having temper tantrums on Twitter because things didn't go their way.
Can't think of who you're
about that.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
I don't either
when you say that,
because I don't recognize this person anymore. Sadly.
Yeah.
Sadly, I don't recognize this person. But anyway, let's get back to the article. Representative Jesus the Stash Garcia and activist Jesse Jackson. Activist Jesse Jackson.
Yeah. Remember the Rainbow Coalition?
That's right.
That guy.
For all the people that, claim to be progressives and, claim to be activists working on behalf of all the people in the city of Chicago, you could never imagine someone who calls themselves an activist and a progressive that might be standing up for working people and students might think that the Chicago Teachers Union would have more power and more say and more control over the city of Chicago than privatized interests that, will be served by Palos Cornholio Paul here. So, all right. So
I am privatizer Julio.
And for all the people who called other candidates clowns in the primary, it's interesting how much they're embracing those clowns who are now endorsing Palos Paul. Wouldn't that by association make Palos Paul a clown?
Yeah.
Just wondering.
Maybe.
Not that I think any other candidates are clowns. I'm just saying a lot of people derided certain candidates as being clowns beforehand, and now they're suddenly embracing those candidates who are endorsing Palos Paul. It's just, what it is.
Yeah.
What we say that is.
What is it, Jerry?
As soon as I clip around, you know what it is.
Hanky. What does that mean, Vince? Hanky.
Oh, strange.
Weird.
Well, don't you say strange or weird. Hinky, that has no meaning.
Why we say hanky? I don't want you guys using words around me that got no meaning.
That's strange or weird.
It is. It is.
Yeah, and let's not get twisted over us talking about these endorsements. This is us doing analysis on what's happening with this race. When we see candidates, even if we didn't support them, and especially if we had valid criticisms of them, doesn't mean we don't see the value in some of these endorsements. We are noticing that, well, look, Chewy got X percentage of the votes in the primary. Now it's a good possibility that a majority of the people who voted for him in the primary are now going to lean toward Brandon. These are the things that go on in your head. It's like at first we thought, well, maybe he's just going to have the vote split between the two different candidates because we weren't really sure who was supporting Chewy. But now that he's come out and taken a position, that kind of shifts it a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's where we see these little things. I mean, even with the candidates who only got about 2%, they have a little bit of influence. I mean, we know one of them finally came out recently and also supported Brandon Johnson.
Oh, that's right. You were talking about in pre-show. Is that the city council person?
We had we did have Andre Vasquez, who was a Chewy supporter, but I'm talking about Rep. Cam Buckner.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, who we'll be getting to in a moment. It seems, yeah. You know what? The thing that's really encouraging here, especially in relation to something that someone said in the live chat here, the Chewy endorsement could move some numbers. Varund DB says, yeah. Andrew Golick shares conservatives need to unlearn a lot in order to understand how things really work. And I think by conservatives, Andrew Golick is speaking to constitutional conservatives primarily. Turnout needs to increase to get Johnson over the line. And I'm just very, very grateful that it seems that the grown-ups are finally coming out to the table to endorse Brandon Johnson as opposed to other people that don't really recognize the value in how Johnson aligns with everything that they claimed to have stood for during the primary election. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right, back to the article. I mean, it's great. Jesse Jackson. Who doesn't know Jesse Jackson? Who doesn't know Jesus the Stash Garcia? Now, also Bernie Sanders endorsed Johnson. And as I said with
and Liz Warren. So, like I said, it was a pretty wide coalition of Democrats that came out to support Brandon Johnson. I'm not saying that's necessarily a great thing on a national level, but on a local level, that's actually good for the base of people that Brandon Johnson is trying to attract for him.
Well, I think that what Sanders is trying to do is trying to make sure that, all the chitlibs and dyed-in-the-wool Democrats in Chicago or progressives that are still hitching their trailer to progressivism will, listen to what he says. Although we've been very critical about Senator Sanders in the past also as being another unfortunate candidate who seems to have not really stayed the course in fighting against those who are constantly oppressing us and him during 2 rigged primaries. But I'm glad that he stepped up as a progressive and endorsed Mr. Johnson. Now, Garcia, who also ran for mayor, announced his endorsement Friday morning, along with several of his political allies on the Southwest side. Jackson, a famed and longtime political activist, announced his endorsement later in the day. Johnson, a Cook County commissioner, is... Oh, did I say... I thought he was a former Cook County commissioner. I didn't realize he's still serving that position.
Yeah, he is.
Okay. My mistake. My correction.
Yeah, well, there's more than one commissioner. He's one of them.
I can admit and acknowledge when I'm wrong. I can admit and acknowledge when I'm wrong. Can't I, Ed?
Of course. I mean, most reasonable, rational people can. I don't assume that you're referring to anyone in particular.
Me? No. I mean, no, I'm not referring to anybody in particular. I mean, I like to compile all the facts as I see them as they're presented to me, and then I make an assessment. But when the facts change, do I stay the course and drive off the cliff, supporting someone I may have been wrong about? No. Especially when suddenly I see people who I believed in, who, said that this is what they stood for. And you know what, who I'll also include, who I can mention? Barack Obama. I didn't vote for him the second time because he said one thing, and then suddenly I saw stuff that kind of set my bullshit meter off the charts. And I forgot, I voted for Rocky Anderson, who I knew would never win, but at least I had to vote so I could claim that I was, participating in the system. Second time Obama ran. Anyway, we're going off on a tangent. So, correcting myself, Johnson is a current Cook County commissioner. He's facing off against former public school CEO Paul Vallas in the April 4th runoff. Vallas came in first of 9 candidates in the February 28th election, receiving 33% of the vote. Johnson followed with about 22%. Okay. Garcia came in fourth February 28th, netting about 77,000 votes after initially entering the race last year among frontrunners. And that's the funny thing. Some people were discussing Lori Lightfoot's campaign strategy and where she failed. She focused on Garcia. She saw him as the primary threat, which is what allowed Palos Paul to flank and come around and get the numbers that he did. Garcia has been a fixture in Chicago politics for 4 decades, previously serving in the city council, Illinois Senate, and as Cook County Commissioner. He announced, that's an interesting, well, I guess there's the commissioner connection there too. How could he not support Johnson if he wasn't a progressive and he wasn't in alignment with the mission statement of being a Cook County Commissioner? So he is following through, and I give him credit for that. He announced his latest mayoral campaign in November, shortly after he was reelected to represent Illinois' 4th congressional district. Garcia became well known across Chicago during the 2015 mayoral run when he pushed incumbent Rahm Fuckface Emanuel into a runoff.
Does it say that in the article?
Does it? Or is that me?
I'm looking closer at the article here. Oh, okay. Yeah, there it is.
You do see, the article does say, Rahm Fuckface Emanuel.
I would like to thank the great mayor of the city of Chicago, Mayor Emanuel, for help making this happen today.
And by making this happen, he's talking about the absolute wasteland he left behind him that Lori Lightfoot continued pushing into oblivion. blah, 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 blah. Let's see here. Manuel Garcia's support of Johnson comes as Johnson and Vallas hope to court Latino voters. It's not a decision taken lightly, and I make it standing for the best interest of the progressive movement without any other hesitation or reservation, Garcia said at a news conference in Little Village. The choice is clear. Chicago is a city of strong public schools, thriving neighborhoods, and progressive values. It is through this lens that I see Brandon Johnson as the right choice and why I'm endorsing him for mayor. State Senator Selena Villanueva, Alderman Mike Rodriguez of the 22nd, and State Representative Edgar Gonzalez Jr. joined Garcia to endorse Johnson. The three Southwest Side officials had all backed Garcia in the February 28th election. Later Friday, Jackson announced his support for Johnson in a news conference at his Rainbow Push organization's South Side headquarters. Jackson, who worked closely with Martin Luther King Jr. in the 60s, has been an influential force in Chicago politics for decades. For more than a decade, I've watched Brandon grow as a father, an organizer, an elected official, and a leader in communities across our city, and I have proudly watched him embrace and embody the fight for justice and show courage in the face of injustice against the people of Chicago, Jackson said in a statement. Interesting qualifier there, Ed, that I'm noticing in Jackson's endorsement. I've watched Brandon grow as a father, an organizer, an elected official, and a leader in the communities across the city. I didn't see activist. Because there is, I guess, a difference between activism and organizing, as Eric Knapp shared with us last Friday.
Yeah.
I guess you can be both, but you have to do both to claim both. Brandon understands the plight of the working poor, and he has the interest of hard-working people. He understands people at the very bottom, and he understands the hurt, the abuse, and the rejection. He will fight for them, Jackson said. Jackson's son, Representative Jonathan Jackson, who was elected to Congress last year, backed Johnson early this year before the runoff election. Garcia is the fifth former mayoral candidate to make an endorsement in the runoff, with State Representative Cam Buckner announcing his support for Johnson on Thursday. Businessman Willie Wilson and Alderman Roderick Sawyer are backing Vallas, and another candidate as well. Incumbent Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who came in third place February 28th, has not announced any endorsement plans. What do you want to bet she's not going to endorse anybody?
I'm hoping she doesn't.
Yeah,
because as was pointed out to me, I think it was you who pointed it out to me, her endorsing someone could be the kiss of death for that candidate.
Let's hope she endorses Palos Paul. That would seal the deal.
Yeah, something tells me she's not going to endorse.
Yeah, I think that she's just going to take her ball and go home.
Yeah, and although she's a wild card, so we don't know.
I need to correct myself. I think that Lori is going to take her balls and go home.
You dicks! What the fuck were you thinking?
I'm not supposed to show that. Sorry, I forgot about the voiceover there. In reference, though, to I guess I can show this.
I mean,
this hot bitch. Look at Lori, hot bitch. What you want? Come on, cause you better fuck her right, cause I will fuck her to death. Yo, I'ma have. She got a big dick, all right. What's up, Lori? What you want? What's up? You fucking me tonight? You fucking me too?
All right, enough of that. But we needed to be reminded that she will take her balls and go home.
Hey, I think I overheard you talking about me earlier, and I needed to lodge a correction here.
It's Ambassador Fuckface.
Yes, that is Ambassador Rom Fuckface Emmanuel to you, sir.
Uh-oh, lost my key light. There we go. Oh, there we go. Must have hit the switch on the floor.
Could you drop it again? It was actually pretty nice.
It's kind of nuclear, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kathy shares. She won't. She's still pissed about the Fraternal Order of police endorsement. The Fraternal Order of Police, Kathy? Are you talking about the Fraternal Order of Police?
Illinois Nazis. I hate Illinois Nazis.
That doesn't mean that that's who we're talking about. It's just,
And we're not talking about police. We're talking about a specific group, the Fraternal Order of Police, who sadly, unfortunately, all seem to support that freak Catanzara and how they plan to influence Palos Paul should he win with their endorsement. But
yeah, hey, look, I don't know if I want to keep ragging on all the cops in their organization, in their little club there, but you guys know that there are guys like that in your club, and you're doing nothing about it.
That's the problem.
That's all we're saying.
It is completely wrong. I don't mean to broad stroke. I mean, in the interest of comedy and commentary, we do need to parse that there are a lot of members of the Fraternal Order of Police who, tend to base everything on the color of their skins also, and the position of authority and power they have being police. Not all police. Absolutely not. I got pulled over this week by a very respectful, polite officer to tell me my taillight was out, and I didn't realize it. He didn't give me a ticket. He's just like, "Hey, man, just for safety's sake." I'm like, "I appreciate that. Thank you very much." There are cops who are doing their jobs and looking to bridge and civility and actually do their job serving and protecting, not
but
using their badge and gun as a way to bully people.
And I didn't know we were going to go down this road, but if you are a person with a darker skin color than Mr. Vasilatos and you get pulled over for a broken taillight, sometimes those situations turn out a whole lot different.
For people of color. That's actually, that's a good point. Yeah. No, it's good we went down this path because we've talked about that before. I don't get freaked out or nervous when I see police headlights in my rearview mirror, as we shared on Tuesday's show. Erica had shared a video. She was going home with cop trailing her for no reason.
Your video had no sound. I'm wondering if I should pull that thing up and play it with the sound this time, because when I did get a chance to listen to it, I was like, yeah.
Can you find it? Can you find it?
Yeah, give me a second to see if I can pull it up here.
That's what she said. All right. So while you pull that up or pull that out,
I will locate it.
You locate that, and I'm going to go into our next grown-up endorsement of the evening, which I was very pleased to see because this particular candidate did not make a lot of drama in regards to sharing their endorsement. When the time came, they just released it. No drama, no 40-hour live streams, waffling. Just a simple, hey, man, this is who I believe is the right guy for the job. Black Alder people back Paul Vallas. State Representative Cam Buckner backs Brandon Johnson. And again, from Black Club. That was not a Freudian.
Yeah, it was.
A Freudian slip. It was because I said Black Alder people, and I went to talk about Block Club Chicago. Anyway, this comes from Quinn Myers. Buckner is the fourth mayoral candidate to make an endorsement in the runoff. Activist and businessman Willie Wilson and Alderman Rod Sawyer are backing Vallas. And the only reason I'm not naming all the people that endorsed Palos Paul is because we were told they would never be joining us on the show anymore, even though they've always been invited to state their position and share with us why they believe their position is a sound one, especially when it comes to endorsements. Cam Buckner, state representative and former mayoral candidate, is back. And I say that with all respect and admiration for what they've accomplished. And that's not bullshit. That's completely sincere, which is where all my disappointment comes from. But I digress. Cam Buckner, a state representative and former mayoral candidate, is backing Brandon Johnson to lead the city, while a group of South and West Side Alder people are throwing their weight behind Paul Vallas. The rival campaigns announced the endorsements Thursday. Vallas, a former Chicago Public Schools CEO, came in first of 9 candidates. We know that, blah, 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 blah. During Buckner's campaign for mayor, he emphasized improving the CTA and the city's bike and transportation infrastructure. Although he failed to gain traction as a front runner, he ultimately came in 7th in the February 28th election, notching just more than 11,000 votes. Now, I give a lot of credit to Cam Buckner for what he's doing on the side as part of his job as a state representative. He is lobbying fiercely for ranked choice voting in Illinois, which would eliminate the need for this ridiculous primary and runoff. If we had ranked choice voting, we could all vote for our first and second choices, right? And I had a first and second choice, which meant my second choice would have been endorsing Brandon Johnson. And we wouldn't have to go into this this runoff election. Save money, save time. It just makes sense. And Cam Buckner is very active in trying to get that legislation taken seriously and implemented. Buckner is the fourth former mayoral candidate to make an endorsement in the runoff. All right, I got it. You know what? I'm just going to stop being immature about it or goofy about it. Activist Jamal Green, businessman Willie Wilson, and Alderman Roderick Sawyer are all backing Vallas. I mean, we do need to give credit to who they're mentioning in the headline here because they said in the previous paragraph that a group of South and West Side Alder people are throwing their weight behind Paul Vallas. This election is our chance to separate ourselves from the status quo of the past that's locked this city in a cycle of violence and disinvestment, Buckner said in a statement. Brandon Johnson has the integrity and the vision to make Chicago work better than it ever has. Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who came in third place, February 28th, and Representative Jesus the Stash Garcia, who came in fourth. This isn't an old article. Wait, this is odd. This is dated yesterday. Oh, okay, because I guess Garcia, I didn't realize that Buckner endorsed before Garcia, because this article is dated yesterday, and it says Garcia has not made an announcement. So
Cam was earlier.
Okay. So this article was published like right on the razor's edge of like when Garcia made his announcement. So I thought Buckner endorsed after Garcia, but no big deal. We do know that Garcia has now endorsed Johnson. The Vallas campaign announced support from several South and West Side council members and former Illinois Senate President Emil Jones. Alder people Michelle Harris, Anthony Beal, David Moore, Derek Curtis, and Emma Mitz will endorse Vallas. Vallas will endorse Thursday afternoon in Chatham, his campaign said in a news release. David Moore, well, wait. I believe that's Squeaky Moore, who pushed through the Lakeshore Drive rename. Pretty sure.
Yeah, that was that guy.
David Moore, who was all about the identity politics representing the interests of Black history, is supporting Paul Vallas.
Really? That seems contradictory to that.
You know what that sounds like, Ed?
Hanky. What was it?
How when you peel away layers of the onions and what people might think they might get from an alignment with Vallas, how true, what's the saying go? When people show you who they are, believe them. Moore has always claimed he was a progressive also, I believe. Maybe they're just thinking maybe they think the fix is in with Vallas and they're going to have to work with them. So they've got to capitulate and compromise themselves to make sure their wards are served. But that doesn't really show leadership or strength. It's really lame. Really, really lame. Chicago Firefighters Union Local 2, the union that represents firefighters and paramedics, also endorsed Vallas Thursday. Assistant Democratic leader Representative James Clyburn endorsed Brandon Johnson Thursday. That's the name you mentioned pre-show. Yeah, James Clyburn. Johnson and Vallas have clashed in a series of forums and debates in recent days. The candidates Tuesday sparred over their starkly different approaches to public safety, while both walked back controversial comments about policing. And we're going to get into that also, because Brandon Johnson has clarified some of his comments about defunding the police. The runoff is April 4th. Early voting starts March 20th, just a few days away. And Block Club Chicago also shares they have a list of mayoral endorsements. Let me look at that real quick. Okay, actually, we should go on this. We should go on this detour because it does share which alder people are endorsing who. So I guess you can keep that in mind next election when these alder people are up for election. Should Vallas manage to squeak in, who you want to hold accountable? This comes from the Block Club Chicago staff. Here's a look at who is backing whom for Chicago's next mayor. Paul Vallas is endorsed by Alderman Tom Tooney of the 44th, Alderman Brendan Riley, Alderman Brian Hopkins, Alderman Anthony Napolitano, a lot of pro-FOP alder people too. Alderman Walter Burnett, Alderman Roderick Sawyer, Alderman Matt O'Shea, Alderman Raymond Lopez, no big surprise there, Alderman Silvana Tabares, Alderman Ariel Raboyes, Alderman Felix Cardona, or do you say Cardona? Alderman Nicole Lee in Chinatown, who was interestingly Lori Lightfoot's proxy
She was her appointee for that
Yeah.
ward, and then she won her election.
Yeah. Alderman Samantha Nugent. Wow. My Alderwoman, Deborah Silverstein, is supporting Vallas. That's telling to me. Very telling.
It is.
I mean, look, Silverstein's been a rubber stamp for Lightfoot also, and Rahm Emanuel in a lot of matters. Despite how efficiently she seems to run the ward here. Alderman-elect Bennett Lawson, Alderman Michelle Harris, Alderman Anthony Beal, Alderman David Squeaky Moore. I call him Squeaky because he has a very high-pitched voice. Alderman Derek Curtis and Alderman Emma Mitz. Cinnamon Roll Speakeasy proprietor Tooney, yeah. Former Illinois Secretary of State Jesse White completely shit the bed with his legacy endorsing Vallas in early March. Oh, wait, was that in the article? No. Well, yeah. The following day, White's longtime protege, Alderman Walter Burnett, announced his own endorsement of Vallas. Other Vallas backers include businessman and former mayoral candidate Willie Wilson, activist and former mayoral candidate Jamal Green, former state education superintendent Jerry Chico, who was Chicago Board of Education president during Vallas's tenure. No surprise there. And billionaire, and lest we forget, last but not least, billionaire Citadel founder Ken Griffin, who left Chicago and Illinois, remarking what a crime-ridden shithole it was. He's endorsing Palos Paul. He doesn't even live here anymore. He moved his operation to Florida to cozy up to Ron DeSantis, who he thinks is going to run and possibly win the next presidential election because Ken Griffin's got his eye on being Treasury Secretary. So we can completely go to that fox guarding the hen house metaphor regarding our economy that's already in shambles with the SEC and every other federal financial oversight committee complicit in enabling Wall Street and robbing the rest of us with this whole bank scandal, bailing out all the big banks, but they're not going to bail out the small banks. So obviously did you follow all this? Like anybody who's got their money in a small bank is going to be encouraged to put their money in the big banks that control everything because they're the only ones who are going to potentially insure depositors. So
yeah, if you've got anything over 250 grand, it's going to be in your best financial interest to move your money over to a bank that's actually going to insure that in case something goes south.
Centralizing the banks with federal support.
Yeah, it's very hinky.
And let's once again, Vallas is supported by billionaire Citadel founder Ken Griffin, who is the cause of a lot of people's problems, including our own, as investors in a certain movie theater company. But yeah, so again, everybody, when you see all the private interests or billionaires supporting Paul Vallas, don't you expect they're going to want something back for their money, even after they've fled Chicago and Illinois, like billionaire Citadel founder Ken Griffin?
I'm just amazed that everybody's ignoring his history of privatization and not. I mean, some people are like, "Well, privatization isn't terrible." Well, yeah, look at the track record of Paul Vallas and see how terrible all these places are going that he's touched with his privatization of schools.
It's funny you should bring that up, Ed, because in one of our stories coming up regarding Palos Paul's privatization connections, I discovered on Twitter. Apparently, Palos Paul is the CEO of an Arkansas charter school that has ownership by business interests here in Illinois. I haven't seen this come out in mainstream media in Chicago, and all of the receipts are there on Twitter. And I will give credit to the person who shared this story when we segue into that story in a moment. But privatization. Palos Paul is the CEO, and the fact that he's not disclosing this, wouldn't you? And that it's coming out on Twitter, and not through any mainstream media sources here in Chicago. Wouldn't you call that
hanky? What was it?
Yeah,
we'll get into it. We'll get into it in a moment.
It's not just hinky, Jerry.
This is such a crock of shit.
That too. Former Whitney Young Principal Joyce Kenner also endorsed Vallas, so did former Illinois State President Emil Jones. All right, so let's move to the good guys. Or am I being too simplistic about that? I was going to say black and white about that, but I don't want to.
Before we move to the good guys, I did have that video ready if we wanted to hear Erica basically talking about what was going on when the police were following her.
Let's share it.
The other day. So let me get the volume up good for this too, just to make sure.
This didn't happen to me when I got pulled over for my taillight the other day and had a legitimate reason to be pulled over.
So look at this, y'all. Look at this. This is a police officer right here. I got my baby in the car. This police officer has been following me for miles. Now, if he was trying to get to the scene here, he would have put his sirens on and went to it. But instead, he trailed me for miles. I got my baby in the car. And then look at all these police officers that show up to this one scene. But we got a police shortage? Get out of here.
That last thing she said.
Yeah.
But we got a police shortage? Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. I'm glad you could run the audio, because when I originally saw it, I was looking at it silent. And when she transitioned to the fact he went around her to that, what seemed like a crime scene, I'm like, well, maybe he was going there. But she made the point. He was following her for miles and didn't put his lights on to get to that crime scene. So interesting. Very interesting. Very hinky. All right. So who's endorsed Brandon Johnson? Alderwoman Rosanna Rodriguez Sanchez, Alderperson Pat Dowell, Matt Martin. I'm just going to forego the alderman, alderperson, just get to the names. Maria Haddon, Daniel Espada, Jeanette Taylor, Byron Sicho Lopez, Carlos Ramirez Rosa, Andre Vasquez, Michelle Rodriguez. Other notable endorsements for Mr. Johnson: civil rights activists aforementioned Jesse Jackson, Representative Danny Davis, Attorney General Kwame Raoul, County Board President Sugar Queen Tony Preckwinkle, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. That's the endorsement I was saying. I don't necessarily know if Elizabeth Warren is an endorsement that you want, but given what we saw the other day with her holding some of these banking representatives accountable during hearings, I was actually pretty impressed by how she was calling out a bank that suggested its own internal oversight was enough to stress test the system. And if that's the case, how is it suddenly we're looking at potentially another complete stock market collapse or economy collapse?
Yeah, it's all the big guys, all the connected guys. They get all the bailouts that they want, and the rest of us, $600. Yep. Maybe we got a relief check for, or two, but a lot of people didn't.
Someone made the point on social media, hey man, just cut the banks a $600 check and they should be okay.
Yeah.
While also not addressing the fact that the smaller banks are not going to protect the deposits of people that don't have multi-million-dollar wealth that could actually probably withstand a bank collapsing because they've got more money than the average person does, right?
It's just we keep seeing all of these bailouts happening on the high end, either whether it's sent abroad, sent to the military-industrial complex, sent to the banks, and in the meantime, the rest of the people are they keep seeing this, and it's like other countries, like France, right now, they're all still doing general strikes because they dared to raise their retirement age a couple years higher, and from like 62 to 64, and I think it's 67 in the United States right now. And the whole thing with that is that they're hoping that people will just keep working and die before they have to retire and actually pay that stuff out. And the stupid thing is, because like I explained earlier in the program, federal spending doesn't need your money to work. They just decide to pay for stuff, and the money gets created because they're the currency issuer. We could have really nice things in this country, and all the
those in control
they don't want that.
They don't want us.
They don't want that for us.
They want to divide and separate us so that they stay on top. Now, we play this clip on this show a lot as a joke, not as a joke, but as a suggestion that this is what torches, pitchforks, guillotines, when.
Like George
Black torches and go!
For videos and photos of what's happening in France right now, and that's what I actually showed was probably a little tamer than what's going on in the streets of France right now.
Yeah,
the French know how to do a revolution.
They do.
So back to endorsements. We know Garcia, Buckner, U.S. Representatives Jonathan Jackson, Delia Ramirez, and Assistant Democratic Leader James Clyburn, State Senators Cristina Pacion Zayas and Selena Villanueva, State Representatives Lakesia Collins, Mary Flowers, Will Guzzardi, Lillian Jimenez, and Edgar Gonzalez also endorsed Johnson. All right. So that covers the endorsement portion of the program. Good night, everybody. No, we have more to cover. Okay, so here's the big story that I found on Twitter. And please forgive me because I am just getting my windows loaded. Don't want to overburden my browser.
Is it okay if I show an example of what's going on in France right now?
Please do, yeah. Why don't you do that while I get this queued up? Absolutely.
See this? This is France right now. There are thousands, I think hundreds of thousands, if I am correct, of people out in the streets because of a possible change to the pension system. Like I said, from 62 to 64 for their retirement. Why is America not doing stuff like this?
Because we have to watch the two Darcys on the Learning Channel and pro football, Ed. There are more important things to be distracted by here in the United States to keep everybody complacent with the bread and circuses that preceded the fall of Rome, the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
All right. So before I can load Twitter, I am going to load what's affiliated with the Twitter story that we're not breaking. The person on Twitter broke it, but I have not yet seen any Chicago news outlets cover this. And by the way, I also tagged Paris Schutz and Greg Pratt on Twitter to find this this Twitter thread that this user on Twitter shared, and who also vocalized, why isn't local Chicago media talking about this? So did you know that Palos Paul is the CEO of a military and first responder academy charter school in Arkansas?
I didn't know until you posted the link to this article in the Slack, Jerry.
And my fingers were not fast enough to go here.
Hanky. What does that mean, bitch? Hanky.
Oh, strange.
Weird. Why don't you say strange or weird? Hanky, that has no meaning.
We say hanky.
I don't want you guys using words around me that got no meaning.
Are we back?
We are back.
I finally discovered it's Twitter that's the memory hog. It's any time that I load Twitter, maybe because there's so much in that feed, that's what suddenly slows down the system.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, before I load the Twitter screen, let me put this back up so we know what it is that we're talking about, and then I will accredit the Twitter user who is sharing this story. They go by the Omega Man at Tavern Styled. In case you missed it, Paul Vallas has recently appeared on the website for the Arkansas Military and First Responders Academy as CEO. Why hasn't anyone heard about this? Perhaps because it involves yet another police shooting in Paul Vallas. There's a lot here. It's crazy. And I will follow this thread and bring it up. Here we go. It looks like the Twitter thread is finally loading up here. You know what? Let me just send it to you in the chat.
I love how the Vallas picture links to a Google Drive of his bio. He's got a whole biography in PDF here.
I just sent. I'm going to keep this link up for now. If you can load the Twitter thread on your end, because since mine is misbehaving.
Sure thing. I got it.
Man, how quickly you're able to get it up. That's what she's.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there might be some cache stuff with Twitter that you might need to clear out.
Okay. All right. So there's the Twitter. There's the Twitter thread. Now I'm gonna read from the Twitter thread as shared by the Omega Man. This is big. Not only did Paul Vallas not disclose anything about this charter school in his 2021 financial statement, the current charter owner, American Quality Schools, operates charter schools here in Chicago. Chicago Office of the Inspector General might have some issues with that. And I guess if we scroll upward, there is Vallas's financial statement that does not go up higher. Doesn't.
Oh, where am I going? Oh, here.
There you go. All right. So we're going to keep that on screen right now as I read from the Twitter thread.
Okay.
All right. Or you can also keep his.
I'll open another tab and read.
Okay. Okay. Where do I begin with this ghoulish Arkansas charter school? Let's start with the board members. Is this the same Arkansas? You know what? Now that I have the screen up here, let me just scroll through since I can specifically relate to what tweet I'm going to be reading from. Okay, here we go here. Pop this image up. Where to begin with the ghoulish Arkansas charter school? Let's start with the board members. Is this the same Arkansas trooper Justin Parker involved in a shooting last year? If so, looks like a federal civil rights case was just filed against him back in January. And the picture's not loading.
I got you.
Okay. There you go. Thank you. All right. Going down. Here's an article about that shooting. I noticed there was no weapons charges filed, so was he unarmed? The most serious charges seem to be fleeing. Perhaps Paul Vallas, as CEO of this charter school, can explain why he was chosen to be a board member. Can you click that NWA online news link?
Yeah.
See if that opens here, and we'll see what that has to say. Hot Springs driver shot after pursuit faces felony misdemeanor charges. Man who was shot by a sheriff's investigator Friday morning at Central and Trivasta after pursuit, during which he is accused of ramming a deputy's car, fought with an Arkansas State Police trooper, faces multiple felony and misdemeanor charges. Stephen Lucky Tucker, 32 of Hot Springs, was taken into custody, charged with felony counts of fleeing a vehicle, punishable up to 10 years in prison, aggravated assault, punishable by up to 6 years in prison. Tucker also was charged with misdemeanor counts of reckless driving. Tucker, a felon on parole. Okay, so it looks like Justin Parker was the state trooper involved in the shooting.
Heard the radio traffic and proceeded toward the area to assist. Okay. I don't know. I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything out of the ordinary with why they decided to pursue this guy. They claim he offered resistance to the officers after a short struggle. He was taken into custody. The affidavit notes Parker suffered injuries to his forehead while attempting to take Tucker into custody. This article is not mentioning the shooting, though, so I'm not sure why it's linked.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell that's about.
All right, so my understanding from reading the news article here was that Parker pursued this suspect, pulled him over. The suspect was fleeing the sheriff, and in pulling him over, a civil rights suit has now emerged from it. We need to get into more detail about the shooting. Here's an article about that shooting. I noticed there were no weapons charges filed, so was he unarmed? The most serious charge seems to be fleeing. Okay, so what Omega Man is saying is that, look, the driver should have pulled over when the sheriff was pursuing him. I mean, there's no question about that. The most serious charge seems to be fleeing. Apparently, it resulted in a shooting that is now provoked a civil rights case. Perhaps Paul Vallas, the CEO of this charter school, can explain why he was chosen to be a board member. The officer who's involved in the civil rights case, Justin Parker, is a board member in Vallas's charter school that he's CEO of, is the issue here. And I'm trying to bring up my screen on this end, damn it. All right, let me go on with the Twitter thread. Next up is Bill Truesdale, a former CPS principal that appears to... Look, whatever the details are here with who's on his board, Vallas has not disclosed this in any of his campaign disclosures, nor does media know that he's CEO of this Arkansas charter school. I think that's the most damning part of this story that Omega Man is sharing on Twitter, because this should be a matter of public record, especially when his privatization interests come into question. That's a big factor that we're all talking about here. A lot of his donors don't want to be known. Apparently Ken Griffin doesn't care, because everybody knows, Ken Griffin is used to buying off whoever he wants. But a lot of Vallas's donors don't want to be known. So why would he hide the fact that or not disclose? No, we can say hide, because it should be on the record that he's the CEO of this charter school with interests here in Illinois. When we talk about crony deals that could potentially happen between those who are elected and their donors and the companies that they're actually, representing or actually doing favors for. All right, so next up is Bill Truesdale, a former CPS principal that appears to have followed Paul Vallas to Chicago State. Don't know much about him, but did find this formal warning from CPS. What's a guy from Chicago with no military experience doing at a military charter school in Arkansas? Can you click on the warning from CPS? And
you want me to read it?
Yeah. Your eyes are burning.
Warning resolution, William Truesdale, contract principal, Taylor Elementary School, to the Chicago Board of Education. This is dated October 24th, 2007. The chief executive officer recommends the following: that the Chicago Board of Education adopts the warning resolution for William Truesdale, and that a copy of this board report and warning resolution be served upon William Truesdale. Description: pursuant to provisions of a bunch of letters and numbers, the applicable statute of the state of Illinois, the rules of the Board of Education of the city of Chicago, and board report, bunch of other letters and numbers, a warning resolution must be adopted and issued to William Truesdale, principal, to inform him he is engaged in unsatisfactory conduct. Wow, that took a lot of words just to say he engaged in unsatisfactory conduct.
Well, they want to make sure that they're not held liable, and they're definitely citing the letter of the law as to why they're claiming his unsatisfactory conduct.
Yeah, it goes on to say the conduct outlined in the warning resolution will result in the preferring of dismissal charges against William Truesdale pursuant to the statute. If said conduct is not corrected immediately and maintained thereafter in a satisfactory fashion following receipt of the warning resolution, directives for improvement of this conduct are contained in the warning resolution. Okay.
All right. So this guy, Bill...
And that was signed by Arnie Duncan, by the way.
Oh, Arnie Duncan. Interesting. Arnie Duncan, who's a big charter school advocate, curious, because you would imagine he'd be as thick as thieves with these other. Well, at that time, it doesn't seem that Truesdale was a consultant.
We don't know what kind of internal stuff was going on behind the scenes with these guys, and we can only guess what Arnie Duncan has done regarding school privatization.
And what he keeps pushing for.
And so, it could just be factions inside those efforts that are fighting each other, and maybe they just weren't getting along as to how they should go about doing stuff, All
right, so right now it's just a matter of questionable connections, right? It's like, why this? Why is a guy from Chicago with no military experience doing in a military charter school in Arkansas that Palos Paul is the CEO of? Now, Omega Man gets into the details. Now, let's get to the unethical and possibly illegal stuff, which is the point of my bringing up this whole story. The current charter is owned by American Quality Schools, a Downers Grove-based company. It's owned by Michael Bakalis, former Illinois State Controller and current right-wing Heartland Institute member. I thought Palos Paul was a Democrat. but he's CEO of a charter military school in Arkansas.
Well, Jerry, before we continue here, I got this really important thing in the mail that confirms he's a Democrat, Jerry, lifelong.
Because he knows he can't run as a Republican here, even though every bit of evidence to show what a fucking lying carpetbagger that he is, from deciding to rent the bachelor pad while he's taking the homestead exemption in Palos Heights, to this. Non-disclosure, to the fact none of his campaign donors want to know who they are because they're probably going to get sweetheart deals if he wins. Doesn't all of that, I mean, it's Occam's razor. The most obvious, how does it go? The most obvious conclusion is the conclusion with all of the circumstantial evidence.
I can't remember what the exact phrase is. The simplest conclusion is probably the right one, something like that. Yeah.
All right. So
we're not Sherlock Holmes.
You can look that up while I continue with Twitter if you can. The current charter is owned by American Quality Schools, a Downers Grove-based company. It's owned by Michael Bakalis, former Illinois State Controller and current right-wing Heartland Institute member. And there's links there. So you've got Paul Vallas, who's CEO of a charter school in Arkansas that's owned by a Republican that's doing business in Illinois. Are you starting to connect some of the dots in regards to Palos Paul's endorsement and support of charter schools and who might benefit from that if you have a candidate who is running against a candidate endorsed by the Chicago Teachers Union? And so much of what this election seems to be about is protecting students, and who's really served, the students or privatization charter school interests, regardless of what you think of teachers in the CTU. They're the ones who are taking care of our kids and asking for more money to make equity across all schools. Charter schools are about, well, you get a voucher and you can send your kid to the best school, and to hell with every other kid in Chicago. No. The money's got to go to make all the schools equal and balanced and give great educations across the board. Education is something taxpayers pay for their kids, and they shouldn't have to pay extra money to go to a charter school when their tax money should go to excellence in education to begin with, across the board, in all neighborhoods and all schools. So in our connecting the dots here with what Omega Man is presenting as far as unethical and possibly illegal stuff, the fact that the owner of American Quality Schools is a member of the right-wing Heartland Institute isn't even a big deal. But once again, Vallas has these strange connection to right-wingers, and I would also say financial interest right-wingers, more importantly. Omega Man goes on to say, I'm having a difficult time tracking down exactly what charter schools they operate. It's weird how they structure and hide these charter schools behind nonprofit boards. Seems intentional. I found at least one in Chicago, Plato Learning Academy on the west side. Can you scroll up to that one?
Oh, yeah. Where am I going?
There. Yep, there. Those images. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I was looking for the best definition of Occam's razor. There's like a million versions.
Did you find any?
Yeah, it's just they say too much in so many words, and it boils down to all things being equal. The simplest explanation is usually the right one.
There you go. Right. As we are connecting the dots of the circumstantial evidence, which ultimately would probably lead to uncovering facts to support the circumstantial evidence. Kathy says it's all about the money. Andrew Golick shares, guess constitutional conservative is left. Because I don't see him chiming in here to carry water for Palos Paul. Kathy also shares pages about these charter schools are disappearing willy-nilly.
I need a drink refill. I'll be back in just 1 second.
Okay. You take off and I'll continue with the article here. Okay, what's the big deal? If AQS is operating a charter school in Chicago, Paul Vallas has an ethical and possibly legal responsibility to tell us he is CEO of a school in Arkansas, whose parent company also operates schools in Chicago. It appears he's been involved with the charter school since 2021. Any financial interests or even promises in American Quality Schools should have been included on his financial disclosure form by law. It wasn't. The fact that we are learning about Paul Vallas being CEO of a military police charter school in Arkansas via Twitter and not Vallas himself or his campaign is shady, real shady. And I would go on to once again punctuate.
Hanky. What does that mean, Vince? Hanky.
Oh, strange.
Weird. Well, why don't you say strange or weird? I mean, hanky, that has no meaning.
We say hanky.
I don't want you guys using words around me that got no meaning.
Green beer. Before the show, I don't have any Coke in the house, and I wanted to mix a Jack and Coke, and I don't have any soda to mix it with, and I'm not drinking it straight.
Oh, no, it's not beer. It's Green River. It's Green River soda.
Oh, okay. I thought you'd put some food coloring in your beer to celebrate.
No, I had my one Guinness, and I don't have any more in the fridge. So, keeping with tonight's theme, had to go with the green beverage.
And by the way, since we are on the eve of St. Patrick's Day, I would imagine it's only fair. We don't have gremlins in the system. We've got leprechauns in the system. All right, so continue with the article. I basically went down to share with Omega Man saying the fact we're learning about Paul Vallas being CEO of a military police charter school in Arkansas via Twitter and not Vallas himself or his campaign is shady, real shady. Why hide this? The obvious conflicts of interests, the shooting. You can't tell me Paul Vallas didn't have a financial interest in this school when he filed this with the state of Arkansas in 2021. It's not a coincidence that a Chicago charter school operator opened this exact school with a different name and named Vallas CEO. So how did the charter application change hands from Paul Vallas to AQS, who most certainly operates charter schools in the city? That's above my pay grade. Hopefully our media wakes up and starts doing their homework on candidates. We're about to be George Santo'd with Vallas. Here is Vallas's financial disclosure from 2021. The only income he reports is from the Blummer Group. Okay, so where's his client list? How many of his clients are charter school operators in the city? Are you starting to see where privatization concerns are coming from, ladies and gentlemen? In regards to him villainizing the Chicago Teachers Union, who has been advocating for equity across all schools, not just the schools that people can afford to pay extra for at the expense of kids better learning. And people will cite, Chicago students, their testing scores are down. Yeah, because you're not putting the right amount of money into education. Teachers have to buy their own school supplies for their classrooms. Mm-hmm. Okay?
And they're blaming the teachers.
That's right.
For the failures. Not the Chicago Public Schools operation that almost certainly has people inside wanting to privatize and sabotage from within. Sabotage, as Jerry says. But
it's interesting too. Yeah, it's like the people who are putting the most amount of work into CTU, the teachers, are the ones that don't get the financial support or that they need to make the school successful. I can relate. I find it very strange. Paul Vallas reports no dividends or interest payments. You would hope a self-described quote-unquote financial whiz would have some investment income, especially with his six-figure salaries. But who are Paul Vallas's clients and what are their conflicts of interest? All right, someone else take over. Hopefully the Chicago media gets off their arse and does their homework on Paul Vallas. I mean, this is
will they?
Well, look, man. Hey, look. I give a lot of credit to Greg Pratt for uncovering. Yeah. I think he broke the story on the homestead exemption, and he also broke the other story. What was the other? Yeah, that was the big news. Was that there was a question regarding his property taxes since he was filing the homestead exemption in Palos Heights. Was he really a Chicago resident? And of course, turncoat progressive Fritz Kagi pretty much. Brush that under the rug. No. He's really in Chicago, and there was all kinds of really questionable ways that Fritz Kagi decided to analyze the true answer to that. But look, the appearances are what it is. Paul's never lived in Chicago until he wanted to run for mayor to potentially serve these interests we're talking about right now. Speaking of which, Paul Vallas's number one backer has given tens of thousands of dollars to the Heartland Institute and has helped govern its sibling organizations on the far right. What a good-looking guy. Sorry. It looks kind of like a supervillain. So why the secrecy? See, Seems like an accomplishment, not something you find out from an idiot like me on Twitter. Also, where's Vallas's client list? Paul Vallas may not be receiving income directly from this AQS, but this Brummer group that is his only source of income may have. After this ABC debate, Paul Vallas, and this comes from Greg Pratt, Paul Vallas said he had helped create the Little Rock Military Academy charter school in Arkansas, but doesn't receive income from it. He's been a supporter of JROTC type programs, he said. That's dated yesterday on the 16th.
Okay, like but they had him listed as a CEO. They had to be paying him something.
Yep. Now, Greg Pratt jumped on this yesterday. I wonder if that was before or after I tagged him, because I saw this yesterday. I mean, I'm not saying Greg Pratt didn't find it himself. I'm not taking credit, but I am saying when I see this kind of stuff on Twitter, and as Omega Man shared at the beginning, where's Chicago media? I instantly thought, well, the people who've got the resources and the staff and the infrastructure to really investigate this, which we're not, would potentially be Paris Schutz over at Chicago Tonight or Greg Pratt over at the Tribune. Yeah. So,
or any number of people at Block Club might be looking into this as well.
Or Marianne Ahern.
Yeah. Yeah, Marianne, you should be looking into this.
That's right. Where's Marianne on this?
Reporter with integrity? Or are you just going to pass on some hinky polls from now and then that show Vallas in the lead with no reasonably believable data?
Because her former husband had affiliations with, I think, doing some kind of consultancy for the Chicago Police Department or something. Omega Man goes on to say, wait, how did I forget to post this about the absolute failures of American quality schools from Milwaukee Magazine? Maybe someone can find part 1. All right, there's a whole link there that anybody can follow. And this is in our show notes. All right, now, this is 20 hours old. We got to reach out to Omega Man and see if he can join us as a contributor, because this is some really, really good, deep research to expose something that we haven't found elsewhere in regular media, news media, which is why I'm like, great, I'm glad I found it, so we could share it with our viewers, because we want to be able to like share all this stuff that regular mainstream media isn't, that has such a direct impact and bearing on this decision, April 4th. Omega Man goes on to say, these are the people Paul Vallas is partnering with to open a charter school in Arkansas. AQS's financial oversight is not reassuring. A March 2011 State Board of Accounts audit for East Chicago Urban Enterprise Academy shows a laundry list of accounting errors: overdrawn cash balances, fund transfers not approved by the school board, incorrect postings on loan payments, negative disbursements, official bonds not filed with the county recorder, incorrect reporting of enrollment, receipts not issued and claims paid, and checks issued prior to the Chicago board approval. Other AQS schools had similar problems. I asked MPS Chief Accountability Officer Robert Del Gingaro to take a look. Del Gingaro just didn't stop at the audits. He made phone calls to Indiana state officials. It was an unflattering picture of AQS. A Ball State University educational audit of Indiana's charter schools showed that all of AQS's secondary schools were receiving poorer grades from the state from one year to the next. That's a charter school. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Up the rah. Fuck Paul Vallas. Paul Vallas wants guys like this running our schools. There's that board member for the Arkansas Charter School. Reading up a bit more on this American quality schools Paul Vallas is tied to. Wow. Seems like they have failed to perform in Wisconsin, Indiana, and even here in Chicago. Paul Vallas wants more of this for our kids. It's all there in the show notes. Go check out Omega Man at Tavern Styled on Twitter. And I would also encourage anybody watching this that wants to get the word out on these very, very important questions, retweet Omega Man's thread to all of your followers across Chicago. Share it with all of your friends who endorse or support Paul Vallas and ask them, what do you think about this? Constitutional conservative, you're no longer in the chat, are you? Yeah, I think he bailed. He bailed. He can't carry water for Vallas on this point.
Yeah, well, he can only fake it for so long, Jerry.
American quality, and we love constitutional conservative. He is my first cousin, although sometimes I don't want to acknowledge that. But anyway, for constitutional conservative to have called me on the phone the other night, laughing like the Joker about a certain candidate's endorsement of Paul Vallas, who I voted for in the primary, I said, well, you were calling that candidate a clown during the primary. So by nature of association, wouldn't that make that candidate's endorsement of Paul Vallas make Paul Vallas a clown as well? Suddenly now you're like embracing that candidate and his legitimacy so long as he endorses Palos Paul. Well, before you were calling him irrelevant. It's funny how that works. Selective logic as far as like to make a point and be snarky.
Yeah, it's one thing, it's like, I don't know, man, your candidate's endorsed by a clown.
Troll people.
You said it.
Yeah. I didn't. No, I don't think that candidate who's endorsed Vallas.
I'm talking.
No, I know you're not. I just want to qualify for anyone watching. That's not what I'm suggesting. Again,
Lou.
A lot of respect. Hey, look, you know what? We dedicated our resources and time to go shoot a My Turn to Own presentation to benefit new homeowners in Chicago because we believe.
And look, if it still helps people, we're all for it.
Absolutely. I totally am. Totally am. But endorsing a candidate who clearly wants to do this to Chicago public schools doesn't seem very conducive to claims that the reason they're not endorsing Brandon Johnson is because they think Brandon Johnson is going to be controlled by Tony Preckwinkle. And the reason they're not endorsing that candidate is because of the disrespect that they feel they got from the Democratic Party. Really? Nina Turner endorsed them? Bernie Sanders endorsed them? They're members of the party. They're not independents. They identify as progressives, but they're Democrats. One of them is white. There's another progressive white candidate that endorsed them. So this can't be about race. It's about bad blood, and I'm just going to say it, sore losing. But, we all have a right to feel bad when we lose. Yeah. We all have a right to bask in our grief. We all have a right to take that time to heal. But not at the expense of lashing out in a way at the people we don't think respected us, to endorse a candidate counter to those who we feel did not respect us at the peril of the rest of the kids across the city of Chicago. That's my big beef with all of that. So anyway.
And there's a huge difference between local races and national races regarding this type of thing.
Yeah.
We've got, on the national side, we have a duopoly that are clearly working together and against us and for corporations and big interests. On the local level, you're going to have that too, but we still have local influence on the local level. We can do more things. We can be more nimble. We can make more changes locally. And it doesn't necessarily have to be inside government to do it. But that's the difference, really.
Yeah.
So you're not getting somebody, you're not putting somebody in power on the local level who you can never wedge out again. We had that was a crazy time with the Daley dynasty. That was something different. I don't know if we're going back to that anymore. I think we finally surpassed it, or at least we're making an effort to surpass it. But if Vallas is elected, that's a step backward, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, Ed. I agree. So Omega Man continues his investigation and his deep Google search mining. Whoa. American Quality Schools hired a principal in Michigan that was previously charged with possession of child porn. And there's a link citation there from the Chicago Tribune. These are the people Paul Vallas trusts to keep our kids safe. Now, remember also, on that note, what didn't Paul Vallas investigate when he was CEO of Chicago Public Schools, Ed? Major sexual abuse scandal. And that was reported on by the Tribune. Surprisingly, nobody's been bringing that out this election cycle as they did last election cycle, which I think is one of the things that contributed to showing what a clown he was and coming in dead last or among dead last in the last election. Now, wow. Good question. These are the people Palos Paul trusts to keep our kids safe, or I guess not investigate in wake of the scandal that happened when he didn't want to investigate allegations in CPS when he was CEO here. Omega Man goes on to say, Brandon for Chicago and our media should be demanding Paul Vallas release his client list and tax returns. We have no idea who he has worked for and what their ties are to Chicago. He lists no assets, no stocks, no mutual funds, etc., despite a lifetime of six-figure salaries. You know who else lived like that, Ed? Although I'm not saying they're involved in the same kind of businesses, but it is curious to me, someone else who listed no assets, no stocks, mutual funds, etc., despite a lifetime of six-figure salaries. Remember a guy who suicided himself named Jeffrey Epstein? What secret interests are being served?
He didn't. No, he did not. Epstein did not kill himself.
Of course he didn't. No. But my point is, isn't it interesting who we find out those who list no assets, no stocks, no mutual funds, etc., despite a lifetime of six-figure salaries? It's so interesting to me that those that don't list where those assets come from are constantly serving shady shadow interests. Privatizers, charter schools.
They found a way to hide it better than Al Capone could.
Guess so. Omega Man asks Royal. I'm glad that he got Greg Pratt involved in this. Hey, Royal Pratt, you might want to point out that Paul Vallas checked no on this question about whether or not he serves on any board, commission, even without compensation. Why the secrecy about all this? Certainly deserves a look by Chicago Office of Inspector General prior to the runoff.
You would think.
This just keeps getting worse the deeper I dig, and it's juicy. Did anyone know Paul Vallas is on a leadership team of the National Education Support Network alongside the head of AQS, Michael Bacalus? It also Bacalus, or do you say Bacalus? Bacalus.
Back alleys. Yeah, back alleys.
I say sabotage. You say sabotage. I say sabotage. You say sabotage. I can never get off that Shatner quote because it's just so funny. If anybody's ever looked it up on YouTube, he's in a radio booth being directed by the engineer, and the line is Spock, sabotage the computer. And the engineer says, Mr. Shatner, can you do one more read, but can you pronounce it sabotage? And Shatner just totally scolds him. I don't say sabotage. You say sabotage. I say sabotage.
Yeah, I think they did an impression of that on the cartoon show Pinky and the Brain. I know they did one for Orson Welles.
You know what's funny, Ed? If you go into old episodes of Star Trek from the 60s, he does pronounce it sabotage. Someone put a supercut together of William Shatner pronouncing it sabotage. So anytime we come a Bacalus or Bacalus, I say Bacalus, you say Bacalus.
No, Jerry, it's back alleys.
Back alleys, yeah, that's good. Who's another guy that looks like he was a male model earlier in his career? All right, I shouldn't.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Michael Back Alley.
I have no room to speak. I'm not going to shame a person by their appearance, okay? But the fact that you see a lot of these people who just look really withered and old, to me that signals that the rot from within is finally manifesting on the surface.
Yeah, Michael Back Alley's Bacalis.
You know, is another example of that.
It's because I like to hang out in back alleys.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz is another one. It's like the evil within her has manifested in her physicality.
And her hair.
And her ramen noodle hair, yeah. All right, so anyway, Omega Man goes on to say, this just keeps getting worse the deeper I dig.
That face looks familiar.
Yeah. Halo's Paul. Did anyone know Paul Vallas is on the leadership team of the National Education Support Network alongside the head of AQS, Michael Back Alleys? It also shares a Downers Grove address with AQS. This national support, look, we don't have to pay anybody to do the work. We can find so much good research on Twitter. So maybe it's wrong for me to complain we don't have an operating budget to do this stuff.
No, it isn't, Jerry. We are fortunate to have a lot of really resourceful people on social media right now. So once again, thank you again to the Omega Man at Tavern Styled on Twitter for doing this enormously deep, cavernous dive on Paul Vallas.
And I just made sure to follow him, so I think all you should too. This National Education Support Network seems like a grift to me. They sell tiers of memberships to schools to offer, quote, educational and operational support services. Why didn't Vallas disclose this? Are any Chicago schools members? Why should any of this have any relation to how we run public schools in Chicago? Who's making money off the public schools and these private organizations that have very, very shady layers, the deeper and roots, the deeper and deeper that you dig?
I'm not even looking in. I haven't even looked into this organization yet, and I can guess that they're basically a privatization club. They probably get together, hang out for beers, go out to country clubs, go golfing, do all kinds of fun stuff in the city and the suburbs, and then talk about how the hell do we sabotage the public schools and convert them into private schools.
Kathy Powers, yep, dark money. Kathy Powers, let's talk about how wonderful Brandon Johnson is. Bernie's endorsement is on Twitter, and Brandon accepted it on Twitter. Art, how is it a decent guy like me can't get a job, but some dude who's a bastard has a good gig? You know what, Ed? I feel you. Yeah. Well, because we don't compromise ourselves and our values. I've often said if I didn't have a conscience, I'd probably be much farther along in life and my career. But it's like we're bound by the way we're brought up and taught. And gratefully, I like to say, I know I was raised right. I had good parents. Despite the dysfunctions in any family, we had very good. My siblings and I had very good parents who taught us what was right and what was wrong, and I think what was fair and what is unfair. And no, you're not being facetious, Art. You're a good guy. You deserve a good, high-paying job for the talents and everything you have to offer. And I know Art's a very good friend of mine. Good man. I'm so grateful and lucky to have him as a friend.
Yeah, he's a talented animator too.
Yes. Yep, back alley people get the money. But back to he went MIA, Kathy.
He can only.
You know what? I'm going to text him. I'm going to text him and ask him. Is he still listening? Why is he?
See, Jerry, after a certain amount of time, he just runs out of energy and talking points. And then it's, it is St. Patrick's Day, so maybe he's just, chilling and having a green beer.
No, I don't think he. Hey, why did you drop out of the live chat? Palos Paul needs you back to carry water for his questionable ties to bad charter schools.
Yeah, tell him that Kathy Powers misses him.
Sent. I will send that too, Kathy.
Okay, Half Clever in the chat says corned beef or pizza. And why not both?
Kathy Powers misses you.
Because, it's St. Patrick's Day and it's Lou Malnati's Pizzeria's birthday. They opened their pizzeria back in 1971 on St. Patrick's Day.
Kathy Powers misses you. Aren't your ears burning? Now I'm the instigator. Yeah. All right, back to
Kathy says corned beef pizza. I had this conversation with my younger brother today in a family chat. He's like, can I put corned beef on my pizza? I said, well, today I'll let it go. I said, today I will allow it. I said, but I know Lou Malnati's doesn't do that. So what you'll probably have to do is get the corned beef from someplace like Manny's and then just put it on top of the deep dish.
Am I going to be banished to eternal damnation for saying I actually like pineapple on thin crust pizzas?
I don't get pineapple as a topping by default. If someone is ordering pineapple, if someone is ordering pineapple on a pizza and there's pepperoni involved, I will eat that pizza. It's that sweet and salty, spicy contrast thing.
Yeah.
But
I like it with sausage.
Yeah, but it's not It's not. I would not order pineapple by choice. If I was ordering pizza, it would not be included in a combo I was ordering.
Well, and I also think it only works on really thin crust pizza. I would never, not on deep, not on deep.
No, that's way overboard for me.
Definitely
to put pineapple on a deep dish. Some people do it. I won't. But then I don't normally order pineapple. But I get it. I get it. The sweet and salty contrast there. Some people like that. I think it's good. But not with pineapple on pizza.
Kathy, I don't know. I think this means she wants us to move on, and maybe we should.
Hey, hey, you guys brought it up. You know,
that's true.
We got it out of the way at the front end of the show.
Yeah. We're trying to do serious commentary here. So Art says
serious pizza commentary. No, I'm just kidding.
Corned beef rocks, but pizza rocks forever. And yes, you will, Jerry. Yes, I'm not sure I get the context. Yes, I will. What? Just quickly clarify so I can, because I'm slow, Art. I'm like juggling a million things here. Okay, so back to Omega Man. So the CEO of this shady organization Paul Vallas is a part of is Rick Mills. Are you guys enjoying all the dirty laundry we're airing tonight? So much dirty laundry on Chicago Corner that we're airing on Paul Vallas.
Look, I mean, we expected that regular media would have gotten to all this stuff by now, but they really have been just barely glossing over any of his past history, and it's really distressing to know that you guys have to come here to find it.
And a guy on Twitter who's doing this on his own time, who's obviously very dedicated to making sure. Look, this punctuates everything everybody's saying about the privatization concerns that mainstream news glossed over. Remember what Marianne Ahern asked Vallas during the debate after asking Johnson, aren't you worried about undue influence, or the way she however she phrased it, it was about Johnson. Aren't you worried about undue influence from the Chicago Teachers Union? Mr. Vallas, aren't you worried about undue influence from the Fraternal Order of Police? That's the least of our worries. This is the main part of our worries, the privatization with charter schools and everything else. Those influences that he doesn't want to disclose, like he didn't disclose he was taking the homestead exemption in Palos Heights, where he actually really lives. So the CEO of the shady organization Paul Vallas is a part of is Rick Mills, former superintendent of the Manatee County Schools. They chased him out after less than 2 years after several scandals and drastic cuts to teachers' pensions. Manatee County had to pay him $130K to leave early. There's a theme with charter schools. They don't see teachers. Well, no, there's a theme with Paul Vallas. They don't see teachers as being valuable in a way that they should be compensated fairly for basically being glorified babysitters that they also expect to educate with the least resources that they need to provide them.
They're selective.
And doesn't that sound? I mean, can you relate?
They're selective in their criticism of you, depending on what their goal end game is, or what
they're
goal
selective in what their priorities are. They're selective in what their priorities are to the success that they feel the teachers are expected to deliver. The teachers are expected to deliver certain things, are expected to put in all these hours, are expected to sacrifice without any kind of resource or the financial support that they or their institution should be getting.
Yeah, but Jerry, they get summers off, so they're just freeloaders.
Because in the United
taking
States,
advantage of your kids.
Yeah, nose to the grindstone. Kids. Well, there are some people that think that kids should be in school all year round. Look, we look at European society as being much more progressively evolved. Oh, constitutional conservative. This is the reason he's not in. Let me. He abstains, much like another candidate abstained when it got a little bit too hot. I dropped you after you played Erica's video claiming with zero evidence she was being followed by cops, and you insinuating because you're white, your experience with that cop that pulled you over would have been different for her. I'm not going to go on to say what else he said.
Okay, but
you and Ed, but you know that Ed, did you know that you and I are turning into MSNBC with our conspiracy theories and warrantless connections and insinuations?
No, we're not, because we don't get anywhere close to the kind of money that they're getting on there to spew all that nonsense at you.
Yeah,
Besides, we actually uncovered a real wingspiracy on this channel. Did any other channel do that? No, sir, they did not.
And also, we shared the story regarding the the Cook County Grow Grant. I was talking about that before suddenly one of the mainstream shows decided to look into it and say, why aren't people getting... And I actually reached out. Oh, you know what? By the way, I did finally hear back from the Cook County Grow Grant after mainstream news had finally gotten an answer on this. I'm going to open my email. We'll do a follow-up on that at the end of the show when my email opens. But we were talking about that before the regular news stations were asking on behalf of small business owners, what the fuck is with rescinding this grant? And why did Cook County say not outwardly say on their website it was because of a lawsuit? They finally said in the email to me 2 weeks later is because of a lawsuit, but that already broke on, what was it, Channel 5 News? Were they ones who reported on it? And an independent news website asking the questions before mainstream news started talking about it. So, yeah, we are trying to basically share the stuff here that you're not we're trying to share the things and ask the questions that are too inconvenient and impolite, it seems, for mainstream media to dive into, like the Palos Paul, the privatizer story, with all of these charter school interests that he has not disclosed, or insinuations that Erica, or video of the cop following her is how many black people have we seen pulled over for broken taillights or whatever, unarmed, not breaking any laws, that escalates into somebody getting shot endlessly? I mean, I don't have the time to go into it right now, but if you want me to, Lou, I will, and we'll present it in our next show. So your claim that my white privilege...
And what reason would Erica have to lie about this?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't... you're driving down the road and you notice a cop has been tailing you for miles. And you break out your phone toward the end because it doesn't occur to you he's been tailing you for miles until he's been tailing you for miles. You expect her to have had camera rolling the entire time, Lou? That's not reasonable.
Thank you, Kathy. This show uncovers what mass media won't. Well, I don't know that we necessarily uncover it because we're sharing what other people find, but we are. Yeah, I mean, thank you. I mean, we'd like to be a part of it. I'm not claiming credit for any of this, but...
No, look, we find what we can find. We scour social media to see if anybody else is finding things. And then we talk about stories and wonder if anyone else is analyzing them the same way we are. So I think we're an important source in that way. Does it mean that we're going to get the story right every time? No. But then we come back and talk to you to tell you what we got wrong or to tell you what the new story is. Why do you think I keep trying to find out what happened to those wings? Because something hinky was up.
Well, and something bigger. There seems to be a larger conspiracy there that Ed dug around and found the information on, which I know I was losing sleep on it every night like Ed was.
Of course, it was entertaining and fun to keep looking for the information on the story. But who could have possibly imagined that a wingspiracy actually became something that was connected to an international money laundering ring, or potentially connected? I mean, why else would we have very little to no information of follow-up on the court cases for this thing? Unless they didn't want anybody in the public to really be aware of what was going on right now because they're digging deeper into some kind of federal investigation. Precisely. Where? We still don't know.
Kathy share, and by the way, I need to clarify something because I ran this picture on our social media also. There's a picture from the last election of Mr. Green and Mr. Vallas sharing chicken in a restaurant during the last election cycle. Not this one. But a lot of people ran with it on social media after that endorsement. And, was it in bad taste? No pun intended. Maybe. But it certainly did kind of punctuate the fact that you're seeing what is commonly, should I even go into it with the fried chicken and Vallas and green eating it. I saw a lot of black people on social media sharing that image, but it was from the last election, not this one. I thought it was taken after they made the announcement that they went to a chicken and waffles place to have breakfast together. That's where I thought that picture came from. But we did remark on our social media, we found the wings, and we saw Jamal and Paul sharing them, and that Kathy broke that.
Yeah, and look, I like wings. I like fried chicken, and it has nothing to do
I love it
with
too.
anything other than being delicious food.
That's right, as anybody should be allowed to enjoy. Back to the Omega Man. I love this guy. I love this guy's deep dive. Manatee had to pay him $130K to leave early. We go off on all these tangents, but I hope you enjoy them. So this National Education Support Network is another shady charter school organization Paul Vallas is on the leadership team of, yet it's not disclosed on his statement. Why? Perhaps Chicago Office of Inspector General can find out if they have any CPS or Chicago charter schools as clients.
And there he's circling the thing that asks, do you now serve on any board or commission, even if not a city board or commission, or not for compensation? And he checked no.
He's the CEO of that Arkansas charter school, emergency response charter school. American Quality Schools, the charter school operator Paul Vallas appears to be a part of, was paid $328,000 in fees in 2021 to manage one Chicago elementary school with less than 200 students. Laugh out loud at this transparency. I'm in the wrong racket. Oh, and look, this guy needs a job at the Tribune or Chicago Tonight. I wish we could afford to pay him. Oh, and look, Paul Vallas is specifically mentioned in American Quality School Board's minutes from October of 2021. With $300,000 plus in annual fees for these charter operations, I'm having an even harder time believing Vallas was doing this for free. Because honestly, Ed, I would imagine the property taxes in Palos Heights are pretty high, especially where you need to claim a homestead exemption. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. So how are they paying for that?
And there it is in black and white. A letter of interest showing Paul Vallas partnering with Chicago charter school operator American Quality Schools via this National Education Support Network document. Paul Vallas's name is right at the top as co-chair. How is this not a conflict of interest?
It is.
Period. End of story.
That's it.
And there you have it. Yeah. Very, very hinky, very suspicious, very, dare I say, damning in regards to what interests Mr. Vallas plans to serve if, let's just say if, Christ Almighty, and I'm agnostic. Please, if there's a God, keep this man out of office. Our colleague Kit Cabello's pretty convinced Paul's going to win. I'm on the fence one way or the other because you know what, Ed? My cynical side leads me to think, bad guys are going to win. It's going to be a bad ending. But of course, my hopeful, optimistic side is like, maybe Brandon can pull it out, and he's not going to be our savior, right? I mean, we have to be realistic in our expectations, but we know, he's going to be more equitable to serving everybody than Vallas will, and that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line for me.
Yeah, well, I know we've been paying probably a lot closer attention than Kit has, to be honest with you, and I think we saw the percentages of voters who voted for the different candidates. We watched as different candidates decided to endorse or not, and who they'd endorsed. We saw other people come out of the woodwork to come out and endorse candidates. And so, I think it may still be close to a toss-up, but these latest endorsements, especially the one of Chuy Garcia, I think may have tipped it in Brandon's favor. But what will really put him over the top is a thing I have mentioned before, is that the youth vote, the 18 to 24s who didn't show up during the primaries need to show up now.
I think maybe that's what that's what I'm hinging my concern over. I don't know that they will. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, if anything, those that are engaged, millennials and younger people, have got to see this is going to be a nail biter for our city's future. Is it going to be more of Rahm and Lori, or is it going to be return in some ways, not all? Okay, I'm not yet elevating Brandon Johnson on the pedestal of Harold Washington, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
No, and again, we got to hold all of our representatives accountable, regardless of how we feel about them or what we think, whether we think they're serious about the things that they say on the campaign trail. So, of the choices we have right now, I think Brandon Johnson is really the clear choice for anyone who wants the city to move forward and not backward.
Yeah.
Obviously other people will have differing opinions on that, and some of it has to do with fear. Some of it has to do with how they've been propagandized into being afraid of the other side, the imaginary other side. We have big moneyed interests, and then we have interests of the people, the public, the workers, right? Pick a side there. It's not hard.
Speaking of a moment ago, and you know how I love my transitions, moving backwards. I'm going to leave you to bring up the video link for our next story, which was just delightful. Now, I'm no fan of Newsmax.
Mm-hmm.
But it was absolutely disgraceful that this Newsmax reporter had been treated with such dismissive disregard by our soon-to-be former mayor, Lori Lightfoot, in previous press conferences. I believe that he is the reporter that Lightfoot was referring to in her leadership skills as mayor of the city of Chicago, with all the decorum that one would expect to go with that position here.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. You will stop speaking. You will stop speaking. You're full of crap, and that's the nicest thing that I can say.
There's a good chance that was him. Yeah.
That was yeah. So let's show what happened on the Florida City Council where it should have happened. Now I don't know that if she had the sergeant of arms or any security. I didn't hear that she had the sergeant of arms or any security escort him out after this, as she did someone else who was critical and actually much more respectful in a much more respectful way that we reported on previously. But here's and the reporter's name is
William something.
William Kelly.
Kelly. That's right.
All right. Let's share what happened at City Council to our utter delight, because we weren't able to go take the Chicago Corner Manifesto in there to share your list of grievances, the citizens of the city of Chicago, and what we expect from a mayor, and if Lightfoot would speak to them. However, let's go to the video.
As a reminder, please remember that all speakers must sign up to speak, and speakers cannot yield or transfer their time to another speaker. Thank you. Our next speaker is William Kelly.
Everyone gets 3 minutes.
Oh, he made good use of it too.
Mayor Lightfoot.
He's been waiting for this moment.
I may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Reporter, WilliamJKelly.com. I'm a veteran reporter in the city of Chicago, Emmy Award-winning TV host, radio, print journalism. I should be sitting over there with my colleagues, but I'm standing over here because on a weekly basis, I was going viral asking you obvious questions. And instead of answering them, you told me that crime was down. My videos went viral, millions of views, comments, likes, and shares.
Okay,
and it was hurting your re-election campaign.
But go ahead.
So you revoked my media credential.
Somebody's showboating.
That should never happen in a free country.
It's right there.
And I'm asking the city council to take the media credential process away from the next mayor of Chicago and the next superintendent of police and put it in the hands of the Constitution. What you've done to the city of Chicago, I feel like this is more of a victim impact statement than an actual public comment.
Really?
What you've done to me is nothing compared to what you've done to my city, the city of Chicago, the city that I was born and raised in, the city that I love with all my heart. You became mayor. The people of Chicago elected you. You shut down our schools. You shut down the churches. You shut down the businesses. You did the one thing that I thought could never happen. As somebody who was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, I never thought in my life that I would ever see the city of Chicago brought down so low as you have managed to bring it down. Shame on you. That is a legacy that you are going to have to carry. Future historians are going to have a hard time understanding how you ever even became mayor of the city of Chicago.
And current
I intend
historians.
to write that book. I intend to make sure that at least there is some possible way for the city of Chicago to move forward.
I wonder if he'll follow through on writing that book.
I hope that you
so.
realize what damage you have done to the city. I hope that after today's city council meeting, you will pack your suitcase and get the hell out of my city. Mr. Kelly, you are a...
Oh, wait, hold on. I got to put this back up because right at the end.
Yeah, I clipped it. Sorry. Yeah. Here was the closer. Here's the closer. I'm sorry. I
Yeah, let me. No, that's okay because I just wanted to rewind.
I thought he was finishing. I forgot about that.
The hell out of my city. Mr. Kelly, you are a pandemic. You are a pandemic. Thank you.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. You will stop speaking. You will stop speaking. You're full of crap, and that's the nicest thing that I can say.
What a fucking bitch, am I right?
No, she's a pandemic.
She's that too. Wow.
You're a pandemic.
Wow. How about that? Someone finally was able to get on the floor of city council and speak on behalf of the people. Now, why don't we show the other video also that I have linked in the show notes to kind of give people a little look back at the history that led up to this moment, because I think it also was focused on the fact that she had wanted to only engage with reporters that were people of color. I believe when she made that announcement, she wanted to embrace diversity in the press, not freedom of the press, because of how she gloms on her identity politics. But let's share. Let's go into the time machine and magic look at the past. A fond look at the
Lightfoot.
past.
What I
Can you
think.
introduce yourself, sir?
Yes.
I don't think I'm familiar with you.
William Kelly. I'm with Newsmax.
Stop for a second. Complete condescension and withering gaze on this man to begin with. Okay, and let me also say before we hear what he asks her and how she responds. The thin skin, the aggression, the how dare you. If I was mayor and someone said to me what he says to me, I probably would have chuckled. All right, well, that's your opinion. Let me lay out the facts. I mean, clearly it's a setup. Clearly he's engaging in setup questions to push his viral videos. Let's be honest about that, okay? And that's fair, okay? But the fact that she has absolutely no ability to be self-effacing in light of criticism to basically maybe try to find some common ground. Say, all right, well, that's what you think. Yeah, it's been tough, but here's how I see it, as opposed to just the way you're going to see him respond to him. I mean, she's literally shaking that anybody would address her this way. And I don't even think that his statement of the facts was as much impolite or rude. I mean, it's certainly not flattering.
Well,
but he was respectful in how he asked the question, even though he framed it in a way that would put her on the spot. And how do you diffuse that? Not the way that she does. So
no. And reporters, I mean, they're supposed to ask hard-hitting questions. And yeah, we understand that he's going to ask some bias-loaded questions because he's got his own framing. But her response to these things, it's why we called her thin-skinned.
What I think everybody knows, but you didn't mention, I don't think any of your speakers here today mentioned it, is the reason why the hotels are empty, the reason why the storefronts are closed, is because of fear of violent crime.
No,
There was, well,
sir,
if I may ask my question, it's a simple question. There's a woman, a pregnant woman was shot at a hotel across the street from here last week at 4 in the afternoon. You know, of course, we have this horrific Juneteenth, 50-some shootings. A young Hispanic couple pulled from their car and shot execution style. This video has gone viral. I don't think we've had any arrests in this case yet. A tourist came to Chicago and was stabbed in the back and murdered on Juneteenth here in the city of Chicago. Our police chief referred to the location of the stabbing as a homeless camp. Last time, I was born and raised in Chicago. I always considered it to be the financial district of Chicago, not a homeless camp.
Now, to be fair to Mayor Lightfoot, and I know we don't often seem like we are,
but we try to be. I've given her credit where it's due.
William Kelly likes to tell long stories with details preceding his actual questions, partly because she doesn't agree with the facts as he's laying them out, and so he wants to let her know what the facts are as he sees them.
Right.
Which doesn't necessarily mean that those facts are incorrect. You would have to verify that information. But Lightfoot often tells people that they have the wrong information, or her information is correct and everyone else's isn't. So it's understandable to me why he does this. It's very clear that Lightfoot was getting irritated by this way of asking questions, especially from William Kelly. And this is apparently the first time he's asked her a question, or the first time she recalls him asking a question because she didn't remember who he was.
Clearly one or the other.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you feel personally responsible for the your rhetoric, your heated rhetoric is responsible for this off the charts violent crime in the city of Chicago?
Pause it for a second. Do you feel personally responsible right off the bat? And I don't think it would have been misconstrued in anything else. I would have been like, are you kidding me? How do I have a personal responsibility? I'm doing everything I can, right? You might not agree with it, but by laying personal responsibility at my feet, despite everything I'm doing, how could I be personally responsible? I mean, isn't that really like the fair answer to this? Because it was a loaded question that clearly was meant to get him views. But man, she takes the bait. Go ahead.
So,
several questions. I only asked one question.
Okay. So
white reporter in the house.
So you know what? That's not appropriate, sir. If you look around.
Why? She had stated that she only wanted to speak to reporters in private interviews with people of color, reporters of color. I mean, that's the only reason he said it. That wasn't off the cuff. That was like as a result of what the policy that she'd actually put in place. So fair jab, I think.
You're surrounded by white reporters, so I really ask you to
do you feel responsible?
Sir. Let me answer the question that you've already asked. So I don't know where you're from. I know what magazine you're from, and I know what your conservative viewpoints are.
Irrelevant.
On almost every question that you ask, you had the facts wrong. So here's what I will say in answer to about the 15 questions that you just asked. No one thinks that a single act of violence is ever acceptable, least of all me. The hotels are where they are here in Chicago as they are across the country because of economic shutdown related to COVID-19. So that the premise of your very first question is fundamentally flawed and wrong. And you can have your opinion on it, but I got the facts. And what we're here to celebrate is the reopening of our city, the great enthusiasm that our residents and our tourists have. If you look at the actual
and that's
facts,
a fair point too.
what
That's
you're
fair.
going to find is that on our weekends, when people are engaging in leisure travel, our hotels are seeing unprecedented levels of occupancy, in some instances higher than pre-pandemic. I think that speaks to the nature of our city and the value that people place in being here in the city. Another data point that maybe you're not aware of, but I will share with you. Over the course of this pandemic, we've had 32 plus relocations of corporate businesses to the city of Chicago, businesses that could have relocated anywhere but chose Chicago. Why? Because we have a great economy. We have a diversity of our economy. We have a great workforce, and they're happy to be here because of the values that they find in the city of Chicago. So the premise of your question, which is it's chaos everywhere. And the fact of the matter is, sir, which you also didn't point out, but I will, so we get this straight, is that we're actually seeing a decline in homicides and shootings. Yes, sir.
Sir, we are done.
Sir. Okay.
We're done.
No. Let him ask his follow-up question so he doesn't claim that somehow we're being biased and slighting the guy from Newsmax. Please.
Oh, but she has to parse it with the guy from Newsmax, which is irrelevant. Yeah.
But also realize this is probably the most
tamest?
the most reasonable version of Lightfoot at a press conference. She got so much worse.
Please, sir. It's 6:30 going on 7. Ask your follow-up question.
Well, my follow-up question is simply this. Many residents in Chicago feel that you've lost control of the city. Now it appears as though you've lost control of the Chicago City Council. Do you owe?
She's always had control of City Council. That's why the
thousands of
pause it for a second. That's bullshit. Because the casino deal wouldn't have gone through if she didn't have control of City Council.
That's true.
Okay. Period.
Or yeah.
Or what was the other thing? Oh, or NASCAR.
NASCAR.
Okay. She has total control, and that's the authoritarian aspect of
the soccer field thing.
Right. We don't have to watch the rest of this. I mean, because it is one of the tamest, but it got progressively worse. But what it led to was her revoking his press credentials to shut him up so he couldn't ask the awkward, uncomfortable questions that she just didn't feel she had any obligation to address.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it had to do with her getting annoyed with how he framed everything before he asked the questions, because you could see he really does a whole lot of exposition before he finally gets to the question. In fact, most of the time when you see, if I remember correctly, most of the time when I've seen William Kelly asking questions at these things before she kicked him out, she would keep asking him to get to the friggin' point and ask the question.
That's true. Until.
No, sir. You will stop speaking. You will stop.
And yeah, Miguel, are we going to miss her?
I mean, just as a point of parody, maybe.
Yeah, that's the only. Yeah. So, good riddance, Lori. I mean, look, he said it all on the floor of City Council where it should have been said. So, now we have a new visitor to the chat. I don't recognize visiting before. J. Ray, thank you for joining us tonight. J. Ray shares that Jamal clearly stated that Johnson has no policies. He's being controlled by CTU. I've listened to as much of the debate coverage as I have time for, and I think Johnson has put forth a lot of policy that doesn't indicate he's going to be controlled by Chicago Teachers Union. But let's be fair here. Let's say Jamal is right, that Johnson has no policies. He's being controlled by CTU. Mr. Ray, I would ask you, what do you see Vallas's policies as being besides ramping up and more funding to the police department at the expense, overfunding the police department at the expense of vital resources, financial resources and programs that can benefit what we've often referred to as the most abandoned neighborhoods in our city, being the most segregated city in the country, hyper segregated. I don't hear anything in Vallas's policies that make me confident he's going to be serving anybody other than who we just spent like almost 30 to 40 minutes talking about with the charter schools and other privatization interests. And Andrew Golick shares, on that note, wouldn't Vallas be controlled by the Fraternal Order of Police? And as I stated earlier, I think more concerning is the financial interests that he's going to serve along with the Fraternal Order of Police. And you know what? By the way, I'll also say this, J. Ray. I don't think being controlled by CTU is a bad thing. If they have some influence over him, I think it would be certainly to their benefit. I would imagine for resources and fair pay commensurate with their service. But I think also, from my estimation, most of what the Chicago Teachers Union does, whether you agree with them or not, in regards to what happened during the pandemic with closures and masking and everything else, which was in a moment that we didn't know anything that we know now. All of that was in the face of nobody knew where to get the professional right opinions from, because a lot of what happened during the pandemic a lot of what we were told has now been proven to be wrong. Closing the schools when we knew that COVID had an incredible, was incredibly dangerous to people with compromised immunities.
But not really to kids so much.
Yeah, but so, okay, great. Keep the schools open because it doesn't affect the kids. Does that mean that it's supposed to sacrifice the lives of teachers that might be compromised with immunity? I mean, that's a fair point for them to bring up. They wanted to make sure that they were being protected. They were frontline, what do we call them? Essential workers. And, it's interesting how much we praise our frontline workers, right? But how little we want to pay them and how little regard people have for them. All of these, frontline workers that were in the food service industry that people don't think deserve more than $7 an hour, constitutional conservative. Well, they were
understand that disconnect.
Right. While they were providing and cooking for everybody because grocery stores were closed, and they provided the convenience of fast food at drive-throughs.
Yeah.
Were they supposed to sacrifice their health because everybody wanted cheap food? Or look, frontline workers are essential. Teachers are frontline workers. And I just think, J. Ray, that there's so much disregard given to them. Yeah, they're bad actors in any union. There are bad actors in any movement. But I'm sorry, I don't think some control by CTU over Johnson, if that even is a factor, is necessarily a bad thing. I wouldn't want to be completely controlled by them. Of course not. But, when we're looking at the lesser of two evils, quote unquote, I think CTU is a far lesser evil than the Fraternal Order of Police that wants more funding and wants to get rid of the consent decree and have no accountability whatsoever in the way that they choose to ramp up policing the streets, instead of us refiguring how we can allot a certain amount of the budget that goes to them towards preventing crime, not reacting to it. Ed?
That's it in a nutshell, really. I'm trying to remember what else I was going to say.
Because I talked too long. I'm sorry.
It was just getting back to the jobs. Really, look, everyone's labor has value, right? They've been trying for decades, probably longer than decades, to let people think that certain jobs don't deserve a living wage, and that's just bullshit. Anyone who works a full-time job should be able to afford to have a good, decent living.
A fair living wage to commensurate with the cost of living, which is what we do not have.
And I'm just gonna let everyone know the reason why minimum wage exists is because of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. And in that act, the intent was always to give people a wage that they could live on. Now, somewhere along the line, they detached the actual livability to minimum wage, and then they stopped raising it. And so people had to take second jobs, or they had to work harder, or they had to try and find different jobs because certain other jobs were, for some really warped reason, deemed unworthy of an actual living wage
or fair compensation.
Yes. And what the lockdown did with essential workers is it reminded a lot of people that your labor has value and you deserve a living wage. Yes, flipping burgers, you deserve a living wage. You got to get it out of your head that isn't a good paying, that shouldn't be a good paying job.
Because they didn't spend money on college to do it. That's how we've been brainwashed, Ed. You don't deserve a high wage unless you've paid a lot for your education. It's like, why should we pay a lot for our education when public schools are funded by taxpayer dollars? You should get your excellent education there. Why are you paying more for it? Why are you dismissing trade schools? Why are you dismissing all of these jobs that serve the public because you weren't rich or elite enough to go to college? That's the mindset that's been drilled into our brains.
Yeah, and the other disconnect is where people go, oh, you say things like, well, do you think that fast food workers should exist? Do you want a place where you can get cheeseburgers, or do you want a place where you can go and go to a movie theater or whatever, where any other place where currently people are making substandard wages? And most people say, yeah, I still want those things to exist. Do you think the people working there deserve a living wage? If you say no, you are contradicting yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Miguel H. We aim to please. And yes, Verond DB also shares, when's the last time a CTU member crossed the city of wrongful death settlement? Which is why we keep saying,
what day is it?
Why, what did you say? What year is it? What decade?
What day is it?
What day is it? Yeah, and why doesn't Fraternal Order of Police force their rank and file to carry liability insurance as lawyers and doctors, who are also beholden with the safety and trust of their charges?
Look, I'm not gonna be too harsh on any of the mayoral candidates right now if they're not going to be pressing really hard during this campaign to talk about ending qualified immunity or that cops should have insurance. I know that they're trying to get all the votes they can, but those are things that have to happen. We gotta have some kind of restoration to public safety in this city and nation, and it starts with making changes like that.
Half Clever shares, the CTU is popular in the city for a reason. We very often get it right. Now, speaking of the consent decree and public safety, I was happy to see that Mr. Johnson has come forward and address the claims that because he previously talked about defunding the police, that's what he's going to do if elected, as Paul Vallas is blowing the dog whistles, as we like to call them. Much in the same way that Bernie Epton did in another way, whose son's editorial we shared last week. Or was it Tuesday? No, on Tuesday's show. Yeah.
It was Tuesday.
Don't go down this direction, Vallas, because clearly you are mimicking your brother from another generation, your twin. Oh my God! What if
you think he's a clone?
Oh no! I think we've uncovered another conspiracy. He looks just like him. My God!
No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think
yeah, because Epton actually had a better record on civil rights and civic service.
Yeah, I think Epton was probably a better person, honestly.
Yeah,
but that's just my opinion.
What his son said. Yeah, with all this stuff that's coming out in Vallas's circle is very, very. Look, do I know Paul Vallas's heart? No, I don't. You know what though? This isn't personal. My criticisms of Paul Vallas are not personal. I do question his judgment and his loyalties, though. To himself or to the city of Chicago, to himself and his friends, or to the betterment of all residents across the city. That's what we're talking about here. None of this is personal. When we're criticizing former mayoral candidates on their choices and selections, we have a right to disagree. based on our disappointment and thinking we were in alignment on certain things. And, we see things differently, and we're outlining why we see endorsing Paul Vallas is so completely against what the pressing issues are for Chicagoans across the city, not out of a vendetta with CTU because they didn't respect you. Dude, we believed in you. We respect you. We respect you. I voted for him. I know we weren't going to talk about that a lot tonight, but I mean, it does enter the conversation, Ed. So I do feel like, where it comes up, I do want to not feel self-censored about it. But let's go into the whole issue of police and defunding. All right. As reported by Block Club Chicago, again, Quinn Myers offering so much fantastic election coverage. I haven't been able to get out to a lot of any of these live forums myself. I believe this was at Talia Hall on the South Side where we saw Jimmy Dore a few years ago. Last year, I think it was.
Last year.
Yeah. So journalist Laura Washington had an opportunity to interview Brandon Johnson in front of a live audience. So he answered a lot of the questions in more detail that I was hoping he would be able to answer for us if he comes on the show. Still, don't know yet. We've got less than a week and a half, I think, to the election, and have not yet heard back from his people about rescheduling him, but I hope we can get him on before this election cycle ends. So he says, I'm not going to defund the police. Brandon Johnson tries to set the record straight on public safety plan because this is what Vallas is hanging his hat on right now. Johnson, facing an attack ad from Paul Vallas about his prior statements on policing, clarified his position during an event hosted by Block Club. Mayoral candidate Brandon Johnson said Wednesday he would not defund the police if elected to lead Chicago, but he would steer city dollars to implement a more holistic approach to public safety. Does that sound familiar, Ed? Have we been talking about, haven't we been, I'm glad, look, fantastic, we're in alignment. He didn't hear it here. But we've often shared, we realize that's the solution to reducing crime. Preventative, not reactive.
I don't think I've ever used the word holistic, though, on the show.
No, but it does kind of encompass what we've been advocating for in preventative, not reactionary. Holistic means you're getting to the net, trying to treat things naturally in a way that will change things naturally or at its source, which is poverty, lack of opportunity. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's prevention, not reaction.
Johnson made the comments in a wide-ranging interview about his candidacy and police policy positions as part of Block Club Chicago's The Ballot Live series. Thank you, Andrew. Cooperative versus subjugative.
Yep.
As part of Block Club Chicago's The Ballot Live series hosted by Laura Washington, an ABC7 political analyst. The Cook County Commissioner Johnson is going to head with former Chicago Public Schools CEO Paul Vallas in an April 4th runoff election. And by the way, someone brought up an interesting question in the chat. Where is it? Andrew Golick. I still have no grasp of understanding why CPS has a CEO and not a superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question. Interesting, isn't it?
Because Vallas wasn't qualified to be a superintendent.
We do have a superintendent of schools.
Do we?
Isn't it Pedro Martinez?
Are they calling him one now?
Can you look that up while I go to this article? Because, actually, we keep referencing I don't know. Okay, so I'm gonna share my ignorance here. Perhaps there is a CEO appointed to run the business of Chicago Public Schools and a superintendent to supervise the operations. That's how no. What is
Chicago Public Schools lists him as a CEO.
Okay, they should be identified as a superintendent. Okay, thanks, Kathy.
But he was a superintendent at the place he came from. So he actually was qualified. I don't think that Paul Vallas was.
Now, Half Clever says he's never taught in a classroom. So that begs the question, would a superintendent be identified as such because they came from a teaching background as opposed to someone who's just a CEO doing business?
I guess we'd have to ask people in the teachers union how that works. Maybe we'll have to have some of them on the show. Or maybe when Brandon comes on, we can ask him. He probably knows.
Kathy, if you have not already sent that link article to me, because Kathy shares a lot of stuff with me in email to look over for our shows. If you know where that is, send it to us and we can discuss that in a future broadcast. So let's get to the Ballot Live series at Talia Hall. Oh wow, the interview is on. We can't play. Can we play the interview? I wonder how long it is.
What, the YouTube video?
For those that could not make it out to Talia Hall, it was an hour and 15 minutes. You can find it on YouTube. We're going to share some of the highlights in the Block Club Chicago coverage.
Yeah, so the link in the show notes to the Block Club article should have a link to the video.
Right. Public safety and crime have emerged as the top issue in the mayor's race, with Johnson and Vallas presenting starkly different platforms on policing and violence intervention. Throughout Johnson's campaign, he's been asked about past comments he's made seemingly in support of reducing police funding. In a 2020 radio interview, Johnson described defunding the police as an actual real political goal, which has been brought up repeatedly at recent debates. Vallas released an attack ad referencing the interview and slamming Johnson for his comments. Do you want to...
Oh, you want me to play the video?
Yeah, I'll continue reading if you can bring the video up. I haven't seen the attack ad yet, but I'm curious to see what Mr. Johnson's now debunking.
Okay, let's see.
I never said defund the police.
We're talking about a whole bunch of stuff, but in particular, like our effort and our move to redirect and defund the amount of money that is spent to policing. Whether
seems Mr. Vallas is missing the redirect as it relates to defunding what's overfunded.
They're just focusing on the word.
Exactly. Look, Johnson chose. I still to this day maintain, with all respect to Erica, we talked about this and everybody else, defund is a stupid branding because it allows people like Vallas and everybody else to make it look like people like Johnson want anarchy on the streets and they don't want to pay the cops.
Yeah.
But
if it wasn't that phrase, they would have found some other thing to dog whistle about. You can't really win with this kind of mudslinging that they do back and forth in these elections, Jerry.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that they decided to latch on to and basically distort the entire purpose of that movement.
By the way, Half Clever shares on Pedro's experience, who's the current CEO of Chicago Public Schools. I love how the show is interactive and basically the shit we don't know because we're not that smart and I never profess to be or know everything. How lucky we have people like Kathy, Half Clever, Miguel, Andrew, people in the chat to help us like fill in the gaps of the stuff. We don't have time to like really go research beyond what else we're putting together.
Yeah, I mean, some people come to me and they're like, dude, you know everything. I said, yeah, but not all at once.
Yeah.
And and it's because we have to pick up information here and there from whatever sources we get them from. And thank God we have people in the live chat.
Yep. And to also correct us where we make mistakes. So he says on Pedro's experience, he came up through finance and does not have an experience as a classroom educator. Shouldn't somebody running the schools not just, ideally, wouldn't you want someone who has an experience in finance as well as being a teacher or being on the front lines? So
it depends on what your goal is.
Well, that's a good, yeah. Let's play the rest of the attack ad though.
It's the president of the United States, calling it a catchy hashtag or phrase, Lori Lightfoot, which I think is actually quite dismissive of the young people who are literally putting their lives on the line for a cause that I think, quite frankly, is not just admirable, but is necessary. There are some folks who are offended by this idea of defunding the police. There are folks who are afraid of that terminology. Do that. We're shipping money away from police and incarceration. What do people not understand about this demand? President Barack Obama,
I understand it.
Took it one step further as well. And
yeah, you like how he's basically explaining kind of what we explained, and he's clearly got more of his head around it than we do. And they're cherry picking little bits and pieces for this attack ad. Yep. And they're hoping that you don't notice and they think you're stupid. Vallas, his campaign thinks you stupid.
They're depending on it.
and basically said that the effort of the defund police movement lost an audience because of that that slogan, I guess is what he's calling it, which I don't look at it as a slogan. It's an actual real political goal. I never.
Now,
so he did say it.
Yeah,
but
now this is where he's going to clarify, because he's describing what it is. Here he is clarifying.
I never said defund the police.
He did, but they cut him off before he could clarify what that meant.
He never said it was an actual goal of his.
That's true too. Yeah. Which is what Vallas is claiming. Yeah, you're right.
In an interview, I forgot. This is the attack ad. This isn't the full
right. All
reply.
Right. So when Johnson was pressed for his stance on the issue at a public safety forum Tuesday, he said, while he's, quote, said it was a political goal, I never said it was mine. He said he would examine the police department budget as mayor to see if it's been funded in an equitable way. There's that word again, equitable, equity. Yeah. How that's like part of our regular vernacular here. Equity. Mm-hmm. What's fair? What's going to serve all interests, not just special interests, whether they're on the side of the police department, the CTU, or the privatizers that want to come into the city. During Wednesday's interview, Johnson said he does not support defunding the police, but he does support a more holistic approach to public safety. What does that mean? As far as my vision for public safety, I'm not going to defund the police, Johnson said, but what I am committed to doing is to make sure that we are actually investing in a smart way. The fact of the matter is that we're asking too much of law enforcement, and we also have a disconnect between law enforcement and communities which they have been assigned to, and we have to fix that. Is that deja vu for us?
A little bit.
Didn't come from us, but clearly we're all on the same wavelength.
I mean, and he does have a copy of the Chicago Corner Manifesto, Jerry.
Let's not lay claim to, come on.
I'm not saying, but I'm saying.
Oh, if only it were true, Ed, I would be very proud. But I'm very glad that we're in alignment and on the same spiritual, intellectual wavelength regarding this. Johnson has said Chicagoans will not be any safer with increased police funding or more officers. We've said that too. We've already been doing it, and crime's not down. But he has promised to promote 200 detectives from the rank and file officers to solve more crimes. We have to respond with immediacy and urgency, which I'm prepared to do, he said. But we also have to make sure that we're reopening our mental health centers so that individuals who are experiencing a great deal of trauma, and that includes law enforcement, fair, equitable, because we've talked about how the CPD is not properly served with enough mental health, not only support, but time off to deal with the traumas that they're facing as law enforcement officers. And that includes law enforcement have the support systems that need to be in place. And he's absolutely goddamn fucking right. And that's what equity is with the mental health clinics. Johnson has supported efforts to scale back funding for policing as a Cook County commissioner. In 2020, Johnson introduced the Justice for Black Lives resolution, which advocated redirecting dollars away from incarceration and policing and toward initiatives such as healthcare, restorative justice, and job creation to reduce crime. What a fantasy that is, Ed, that creating jobs might actually provide opportunities to prevent desperate people from actually going out and committing crimes. Maybe an education, better education, or trade schools offering opportunities to jobs that would pay you to put food on your table might be more of a fair living wage, and dare I say, like a higher minimum wage, might be a little bit more of appealing to kids that don't have those opportunities, who think, well, shit, man, I'll go deal drugs on the corner. Got to make money somehow in a neighborhood where there is no jobs, no infrastructure, and I didn't even get the education, the proper education. Although I would say a lot of, luckily a lot of kids have good families that steer them away from that. Not all do. Of all races, proponents, including Johnson, did not offer the ordinance as a direct response to organizers' demands to defund the police. He said at the time, the non-binding resolution was not about laying people off, consolidations or closures, but rather calling for an expansion of government services, he said in 2020. In contrast, Vallas has advocated to fill police department vacancies and rehire retired officers, and those who have transferred out of Chicago. He's also proposed running 2 police academy classes in 1 year to expedite getting officers into the city's neighborhoods. Talia Hall is a great venue.
I saw Otoboke Beaver play there.
Yeah, although we weren't too pleased to see how some people, the inmates were running the asylum as far as, let's just say, hey, he went public with it. Jimmy Dore performed there, and apparently a lot of the staff there were not happy about the fact that Jimmy Dore was critical of their neoliberal Democratic darlings. And it's why he wasn't invited back, which is bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Do you know how much business Jimmy Dore brought to do you know how much business he sold out shows? He had to add shows that basically increased the revenue for their serving staff there. That we don't like the fact he's knocking some of these Democratic sacred cows that are oppressing, actually part of the oppression. Fucking idiots. But it's a beautiful venue. I'm talking about the physical is what I'm talking about.
You know, you can only do what you can do with people who own businesses and stuff. They've got political views that don't align with yours, you know, and they don't want your money.
And they don't want anybody, and they don't want anybody to hear what you have to say. That's the whole cancel culture that's gone into hyperdrive with, you know, woke used to be a good thing. It used to be awake, be conscious of what's around you. Now it's been embraced as, well, we don't care what you have to say because what we're saying is right and what you're saying is wrong. And we're all going to be like delicate flowers about it. So,
well, people, what has happened is people don't make the distinction between being woke and weaponizing wokeness. And so when people go and weaponize wokeness, all they do is just call you woke as a pejorative term.
Because they don't like you.
Because they don't like you, or they just don't like the way that you're manipulating them with wokeness. It's like, and all wokeness really means is that you're enlightened to equality and against discrimination.
Ladies and gentlemen, straight from the horse's mouth, and I don't mean to claim you're a horse, Nimesh. Nimesh is a Chicago police officer, friend of the show. A research study by the Chicago Federal Reserve Bank concluded that offering jobs to young people reduces crime.
Well, there it is.
From a police officer, rank and file police officer, and friend of the show, who I respect immensely.
And apparently Paul Vallas's version of that is offering them cop jobs.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Because,
there you go.
I mean, look, you want to have a jobs program, they don't have to be police officers. You can come up with other things that will help the city out and probably be more effective in helping to turn a lot of the underserved communities around without boosting the ranks of police. We know this.
Let me take a step back and share what Kathy shared in the chat regarding CEO versus superintendent, because it is very relevant and important. LinkedIn, we can ascertain from the above that the career path to becoming a school superintendent is very different from that of a CEO. The path of a CEO is heavily focused on finance and operations. Similarly to a receiver, CEOs replace traditional superintendents in managing the daily operations of struggling school districts in an attempt to improve failing schools. But wouldn't we all agree that schools failing has to do with the fact that you're not putting the right amount of investment in running them and providing programs for the students? How does something successful without the proper infrastructure and funding to begin with?
Yeah, and stuff like the inequality between the different schools or funding or support or whatever is what gets people to lean toward those let me have a school voucher, or let me decide where I want to send my kid kind of a situation instead of public schools, because public schools get sabotaged. And they
Let me say sabotage. You say sabotage.
And then they get unfairly favored in one ward compared to another ward. And if we fix that, if we create, again, the word is equity, if we create equity in the public school system and provide every school with the resources they need to help every student succeed, then we don't have the need for people to be crying out for vouchers.
Yep. Back to Mr. Johnson's conversation at Talia Hall. Another major campaign issue in recent months has been the myriad problems with Chicago's public transportation system, including long wait times for trains and buses, inconsistent schedules, crime, and uncleanliness. We can leave the picture of Talia Hall up.
Oh, okay.
I just figured since that's the venue. In fact, let me do this. Can I go larger? There we go. I just figured something nicer to look at than text that I'm reading from. And there's Mr. Johnson on stage with Miss Washington.
Yeah, and you're right. It's a beautiful venue. It's just a shame that people decided to
tone police.
Yeah,
which we're not very fond of. I'm not. Whether we agree or disagree, it's like let's hear each other out. No, you can't say that. You shouldn't say that. What are people going to think? Oh, blah 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 blah. Okay. Public transportation, inconsistent schedules, crime and uncleanliness, and ghost trains. Vallas has called for a dedicated seat, right back to the police, dedicated CTA police unit to replace the unarmed security guards who patrol the system. I see police officers on trains and anyway, so what's he talking about? They're already there. Johnson said he's not opposed to police along our transportation system, but simply adding more police to CTA stations and trains will not solve the issue of crime or deteriorating conditions. Much like our neighborhood policing, if that is our only strategy, then we're not dealing with it in a very comprehensive way, or I would say preventative, and I think Ed would too. Because this dynamic that somehow the only way you can serve the people of Chicago is through surveillance and policing, I hope the city of Chicago recognizes that is not a world-class city. Over the past year, commuters and older people have channeled their frustration with the city's trains and buses directly at CTA President Dorval Carter. In November, commuter advocacy group Commuters Take Action called for Carter to resign. When Johnson was asked Wednesday if he would change leadership at the top of the CTA, he stopped short of saying he would oust Carter. There is a leadership problem there, Johnson said. Under my leadership, here's what I expect. People to be compassionate, collaborative, and competent. And if you can't demonstrate those very basic fundamental traits of a leader, then we will have to look elsewhere to find that. Yeah. Johnson also discussed his views on school funding, property taxes, rent control, and other issues in Wednesday's interview. Vallas and Johnson have spent the past 2 weeks racking up endorsements from elected officials, unions, and other groups. And you can watch the video on YouTube in its entirety. It's an hour and 15 minutes. The comprehensive interview with Brandon Johnson there that was hosted by Block Club Chicago. Yes, Ed.
Early voting, March 20th.
March 20th. All right. In other stories that are not election related, we also have in our show notes that the final schedule of the mayoral forums and debates agreed to by Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson are on Twitter as posted by Greg Pratt. Our last story that I felt was important to talk about, because I do think we have actually followed this before as well. How's everybody out there in the live chat? Let's see who's left. Oh, we're at 15 viewers. Nimesh. Okay. And Nimesh shares. Let's just have cops on every street corner, every bus, every train, every shopping mall, etc. Will that will solve the crime issue, right? No. And we appreciate you agree. Kathy, I don't know the Walgreens reference. I haven't had a chance to
is she talking about Walgreens will not sell the I believe the abortion pill?
Okay.
Birth
I
control.
do remember that now. Yeah, I do remember seeing that.
And so people are basically like, okay, screw off Walgreens. Osco's right across the street.
Yep. They've basically chosen who they want to pay their bills, Kathy, and they've shown who they are. It's really abhorrent that Walgreens is taking a moralistic, judgmental viewpoint over women's reproductive rights. Clearly, it's ridiculous. they should not be in a position to dictate to women what their choices are, whether it's proactive with birth control or afterwards, if they took the proper precautions and it still didn't work. So there you go. Walgreens has clearly decided they're going to ride a moral high horse here and marginalize and dismiss the important issues of women's reproductive rights.
No one should be able to get in between the decisions of a person and their doctor for health care, for any health reason, especially women. So this is really a no-brainer. It should really be part of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, basically, right to privacy. But
what I find interesting too, Ed, is that any business has a right to prevent a birth control pill is a medical treatment, and they're basically preventing people from a medically prescribed choice that their doctors would have to prescribe for them also, right? So they're basically superseding the decisions of a doctor who's your healthcare provider that you have a private relationship with to manage your own health.
Yeah, here's the way I see it. If you have a store or a business and you sell products, you have a choice on what products you want to sell. If you have a pharmacy, no, you do not have a choice as to what drugs you make available to patients. Patients should be able to go to your pharmacy and get the drugs prescribed by their doctors.
That's right. So Kathy also went on to say, you know what, Kathy, this peripherally came across my radar because of all the other election stuff that we're covering. I appreciate you sharing it with me and that you reminded us of it in the chat here. Our bandwidth is so limited with the clients I'm working for to earn a living aside from the 12-15 hours we put into doing a show twice a week. So I appreciate.
She's talking about Walgreens,
California. Yeah, there's a boycott in California.
Yeah, Walgreens, you're being dumb. The economy is rough enough as it is. You really want to make it harder for yourselves?
Well, she goes on to say it's not just the abortion medication. It could be any medication that they aren't making a fortune on. Okay. Kathy, too, that is so okay. So I don't know does this have to do with Walgreens in Chicago or Walgreens nationwide or Walgreens just in California? Because, not that it's not an important story to cover here in Chicago, but we're so hyper-focused on what's happening locally that if this is a national thing, nationwide. Okay, so I would hope and trust. I haven't had a chance to catch Hardlands Media this week with all the stuff I'm doing, but did Hardlands Media cover it? Did Kid cover this?
I don't know.
I think he may have. I for some reason, I think I saw it in my YouTube, what do they call it, your informational stream or whatever. I think Kit may have covered it, but that is definitely okay. Yeah, nationwide. Then, that's a broader story than how hyper focused we are and stuff here in Chicago. But it is important because it does impact people here in Chicago too. So everybody, CVS is your option. There are other pharmacies besides Walgreens, and Walgreens is a monopoly that they can get away with this. I mean, not to dive too much into the weeds, I can't get my product into Walgreens stores, which would benefit so many cane and crutch users because they're a monopoly and because they dictate what goes on their shelves. That's the free market. And who supplies them with the monopoly medical device companies that they only have their contracts with. So yes, I do know that. I've pitched to them, so I know they're local. What's never at CVS? Okay. Well, guys, I'm going to state right now, I'm not educated on this story to comment on it. That's why we have specific stories in our show notes that we did have the time to go over before the show, and in often cases are discovering details of during our show and during our analysis and coverage, because we're not reporters or journalists proper. But okay, yeah. I mean, the mess shares that has to do with Walgreens not selling abortion medication over the mail in 21 states after receiving threats of legal actions by respective attorney generals. This is a story that we were not prepared to cover because we didn't dive into it. And I guess maybe we need to look into it for next Tuesday, since there is a big demand for hearing about it. So, all right. Kathy, go ahead and send it to me. We'll look at it for next Tuesday's show. The expectations of people, I appreciate that they want to hear it from us, but we can only juggle so much. So send us the stuff and we'll look through it. We're focused on the stuff that is really crucial right now as we go into the election, April 4th. So please understand we're, trying to put attention on other important stories that include vulnerable kids, which is kind of like a pet concern of mine, that are in juvenile jail, as well as the foster care system, which we've reported on before, of all races, that are not of ages to properly defend and advocate for themselves. So this comes to us from Carlos Ballesteros, Injustice Watch, and Kelly Garcia of Injustice Watch. This is fucked up. Teens at Cook County Juvenile Jail face excessive force, extreme isolation, and other civil rights abuses, Watchdog finds. Interviews, site visits, and records reviewed by a legal advocacy group reveal abusive behavior by staff against mostly black teenagers with learning disabilities, according to a new report. Jail officials, of course, deny the claim. This story was originally published by Injustice Watch, a nonprofit newsroom based in Chicago. You can subscribe to Injustice Watch's newsletter online as linked in the Block Club Chicago article. A year-long review of practices inside the Cook County Juvenile Temporary Detention Center found that staff often use dangerous and illegal forms of restraint and isolation, fail to keep adequate records, and are sometimes entirely inhumane to the teenagers they oversee. This is also happening within the foster care system, as we previously shared from other coverage months ago, related to another story. So egregious are the conditions inside the 5-story center on Chicago's West Side. The authors of a state-sanctioned report published Friday recommend sweeping reforms, the most dramatic being shutting down the institution and starting over with a more community-based system. The 96-page federally funded report authored by the nonprofit disability rights group Equipped for Equality is just the latest in a stream of critical findings by outside groups. I know, my goodness, I know the people at Equipped for Equality. That's a great group. The guy who runs it, Eric Lipp, I believe that's his organization. Injustice Watch previously reported on similar findings by a committee convened by Cook County Circuit Court Chief Judge Timothy Evans in a 2021 report on the facility's alleged failure to provide special education services during the COVID-19 pandemic. Given the long-standing, serious, and pervasive problems identified in this report and the profound impact they have on the youth committed there, broader systemic reforms are essential, concluded the authors of the most recent probe. The JTDC is perfectly situated to provide critical services to help steer these youth away from further court involvement and into productive lives in the community. Tragically, not only is it failing in this regard, but it is often making their problems worse. Evans, whose office oversees the juvenile jail, and Superintendent Leonard Dixon declined requests to be interviewed. But in a written response, Dixon said the report is replete with gross misrepresentations, defamatory statements, and unsupported legal conclusions, and he called it an exercise in sensationalism. What a way to dismiss really important stuff that was obviously investigated and vetted. He criticized the nonprofit for failing to provide names of individual residents to jail officials or reporting specific allegations of abuse to the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. Dixon also said the report's authors failed to understand the role of detention in our complex criminal justice system and said the JTDC meets all state and national standards. The persistent and sustained reliance on misinformation as the basis of this report, even in the face of established and well-understood local and national standards, is disturbing at best, Dixon said. Services at juvenile jail lacking for youth with disabilities. A vast majority of the youths at the detention center are Black, and about half have learning disabilities or mental health conditions such as anxiety, depression, or bipolar disorder. I wonder why, Ed. According to the report, the detention center housed 161 youths awaiting trial every day on average during 14 months of the study, with an average length of stay of 34 days county data shows the Equipped for Equality report was drafted after 1,000 hours of research, including 7 site visits, the review of reams of available records, and interviews with more than a dozen staffers and 30 teens residing there. That's all sensationalistic.
Oh, man.
The investigation centered on the JTDC and Nancy B. Jefferson Alternative School located inside the detention center, and how both failed to provide adequate special education services for youths in custody with learning disabilities. NBJ violates federal and state special education laws by ignoring mandated timelines, not providing services based on students' individual needs, and at times not providing any services at all. The report concludes, this results in critical missed educational opportunities for students who are often excluded from school and in desperate need of educational services to prevent them from cycling in and out of the criminal system. The school's principal, Leonard Harris, and Chicago Public Schools CEO, who's probably managing all the financial stake there, who's supposed to be managing how things can improve, right, because of his financial expertise, as who just shared in the chat previously. Thank you, Kathy, to what a CEO is supposed to do. Oh, of course. Chicago Public Schools CEO Pedro Martinez declined to be interviewed. Crooks and thieves, Ed. Thieves and scoundrels. But in a letter shared with Injustice Watch, 4 top CPS officials, including Stephanie Jones, head of the district special education office, said the report contains several inaccurate statements and fails to accurately characterize the student experience at NBJ and the support that CPS provides to NBJ's student population. The Equipped for Equality investigators found that the school lacked the professional support staff to serve special education students, and some classes lacked a special education co-teacher. In their response letter, CPS officials, CEO, because a CEO is clearly better than a superintendent with educational background. CPS officials said the school currently has no teacher vacancies and denies letting some special education students fall through the cracks, but investigators stand by their findings and observations, said Rachel Shapiro, a managing attorney at Equipped for Equality and the report's primary author. They can say until they're blue in the face that there are sufficient teachers in the building, and they might have hired a sufficient number of teachers, but the fact is we were there, and this is what we saw, Shapiro said. The report says the JTDC failed to keep adequate records of incidents involving excessive confinement and dangerous physical restraint practices. Following interviews with teens and staff and a review of available records, lawyers with Equipped for Equality accused the detention center's rapid response system for behavioral crises, known to youths and staff as rovers, of using excessive physical restraint. Illinois law limits physical restraint to times when the student's behavior represents an imminent danger of serious physical harm to the student or to others. But one teacher interviewed said rovers will restrain youths if a kid is getting loud and rowdy and told to stop and not even fighting, according to the report. Isn't that a way to teach respect and basically figure out how to properly guide a student towards understanding maybe that's not acceptable, calm and reasoning. No, let's just restrain them, man. Gotta be authoritarian, gotta be abusive. Youths in custody said they witnessed restraints that were unsafe and entirely inhumane. I believe all this. Why would Equipped for Equality, what do they have to gain by making any of this shit up? Really? With all of the visits and the 1,000 hours of research, and this is... Youths in custody said they witnessed restraints that were unsafe and entirely inhumane, some of which caused severe injuries, including broken bones, busted eyes, and in one case, a seizure. The detention center has a grievance process for youths in custody to report excessive physical restraint, but some said they were afraid to complain about the rovers. As one youth stated, "Ain't no snitching on the rovers," the report states. Rovers are required to fill out incident reports each time they physically restrain a youth. Rovers. I mean, it's like dogs who are supposed to be set on anybody that is not operating in compliance. Rovers are required to fill out incident reports each time they physically restrain a youth in custody. Lawyers with Equipped for Equality said they reviewed more than 500 incident reports and found them lacking critical information such as the type of restraint used, the length of the restraint, and detailed descriptions of injuries happening during the incident. The report also includes details about an unsanctioned practice at the detention center known to the youths in custody as sitting on the wall. According to the report, detained youths who break the rules enough times are placed on a behavior modification plan and moved to one of 2 disciplinary pods. Detained youth sleep, eat, and go to school in their pods under tight supervision. And for several hours a day, go ahead.
Jerry, did you see the latest episode of The Mandalorian?
Yes. Yes. Yes, at the end with them deciding to wipe the guy's brain. Yep.
I don't know. I guess we shouldn't do spoilers, but man, I mean, just we can say there's basically because like the Empire from Star Wars is over, and now there's a new Republic. Now they're trying to rehabilitate all the people who used to work for the Empire.
So it's a good cause, right? I mean, clearly it's a good attempt to try to rehabilitate people to be more productive and to basically integrate with a more democratic republic.
Except it's kind of a new face on a similar system, and they're just not realizing it yet. It's I don't know. It has some parallels to it has some parallels to how our government currently works with the duopoly, but otherwise because the elements of rehabilitation or behavior modification that just kind of sparked in my head and reminded me of that episode.
And you know what, guys? You might not like science fiction. You might not like fantasy, but the best science fiction and I wouldn't even call it Star Wars science fiction. It's a space fantasy. It's a fairy tale set in space where they, use everything from samurai warriors to cowboys to mystic wizards to basically tell their stories. It's a wonderful, rich, robust universe to reflect and comment on real world issues. Star Trek did the same thing. It's thought provoking. So yeah, I thought this last episode of The Mandalorian was one of the best ones I've seen, and it didn't really focus on Mando. It focused on rehabilitation of people with different views or who may have been misdirected and made mistakes within a rehabilitative system. I mean, look, in The Mandalorian, he was a scientist for the Empire with good intentions, trying to figure out like how they could now rehabilitate him for the good of what the new government wanted to do. But as we're talking about the rehabilitation here, and it's literally like a behavioral modification thing that's very, very punitive.
And then it also speaks to old school ways of mental health facilities where they used to use shock treatments.
Yep.
And I guess in some ways, some locations still do use low levels of electric shock in therapy, and it's controversial as hell.
Yeah, it's punitive rehabilitation, which punitive has no place in rehabilitation. And for several hours of the day, including during school instruction time, detained youths in a disciplinary pod said staff ordered them to sit silently in a chair with a desk along the wall outside their cells until they earn enough good behavior points to get off the wall, which could take up to 15 days. This is exactly like the abuses in the past in mental health asylums. I mean, this is like out of something.
It's like someone is just making it up as they go along and figuring, okay, I guess this will work. And then they're like, well, since we're doing this, I guess we'll keep doing it.
And what a great reflection on the CEO management schools of Pedro Martinez and those running CPS, right? Is this not a reflection of how, can you imagine the Chicago Teachers Union having any kind of involvement in this as opposed to like trying to do everything they could to advocate for their kids and their students, especially those with learning disabilities and mental health issues?
It's a story I wasn't even thinking we were going to cover tonight. Well, and I'm looking at this and I'm like, holy crap.
It broke before the show when I was going to Block Club Chicago to compile our other stories. This was like the most recent story. I'm like, oh yeah. Let's talk about this fresh. Because we talked about the negligence in the foster care system also.
And I think I had mentioned in a previous live stream how a lot of times news stories pop up right during election season to paint groups one way or another. And so even though this is not a thing that you're going to blame the teachers unions for, someone's going to try and find a way to blame them.
Well, here's something that I also found sad. And I mean, it's an important breaking story, but where do stories go to die in the news cycle, Ed?
Friday news dump.
This was released. I saw this online. Well, I was logging on, collecting our stories around 4:30.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw this, and it's like, who's going to talk about this through the weekend? This should be something that's dropped Monday. So all the media, and maybe they will. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not going to say that that's not going to happen. This is an important report. I do hope that, you know, the mainstream news media here in Chicago has to be on top of this, even if it was reported on a Friday. I'm sure Equipped for Equality sending out press releases to every news organization to make sure that they're aware of what their findings disclosed. But the article goes on to say youths in custody consistently identified sitting on the wall as commonplace at the detention center. I sit on the wall all day hearing the clock tick ready to tip off, reported one detained youth who recently attempted suicide, according to the report. I feel like they treat us like dogs, said another youth about their time in the disciplinary pods. Lawyers with Equipped for Equality said they witnessed the practice during their site visits. In one of their visits, 8 teens were in a computer class with no computers, no board, no technology, and no live instruction. The students sat in front of their cells on the wall, looking at each other's backs. Plastic chairs were turned on their sides and used as desks, according to the report. Yet investigators couldn't find records on the practice at the detention center. Nothing is written in the resident handbook or JTDC policies about being placed on the wall, according to the report. In his response letter, Dixon confirmed the reports from detained youths about staffing ordered them to sit on the wall, but said the phrase is a colloquialism. The resident is in a chair and a desk, separated from the rest of the residents as an alternative to confinement while they're working on their behavior modification plan. Also, would you want to call it counseling and therapy? I mean, those are elements into what you're trying to do, not just modify their behavior, but counsel them, provide therapeutic support.
Have you ever heard the phrase, the beatings will continue until morale improves?
Have I ever heard that? If I'm not mistaken, doesn't it come from the movie that our favorite drop-in comes from?
Blowjob! Blowjob! Blowjob!
Or am I wrong?
Did they say that in Animal House? We'll have to watch that again.
What was the phrase again?
The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Okay, I'm wrong. The morale part is what reminded me of Dean Wormer. But yeah, I missed the first part of what you said. Yeah, that wasn't from Animal
Double secret probation.
Yeah. The beatings will... Oh, actually, Kit said that phrase a couple times. The beatings will continue until morale improves. Not to us, but I do remember it's been passed around.
I don't recall its actual origin, but I've heard it over the decades.
Yeah,
I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how they do these things. It's like, dude, that's not how you improve morale.
A behavior modification plan. Also, 15 days is rare, Dixon added. The report calls on Evans and Dixon to collect more detailed information about all physical restraint incidents, ban prone restraints, provide post-incident stress debriefs for all youths who were physically restrained, mandate the, quote, use of body cameras during all restraint incidents from start to finish. Yeah, you think? And notify parents, guardians no more than 2 days after an incident of physical restraint that they may request a meeting to discuss the incident. Through a spokesperson, Evans said he ordered intensive training on the appropriate use of force for all rovers by April 15th and ordered Dixon to submit a report on all use of restraints and use of force to his office. Too little, too late, Shapiro said. It does not address the injustice that has already been committed against youth who were previously or are currently experiencing rights violations. And I want to scroll up here and share the two reporters on this, which I think we should be very grateful to. Carlos Ballesteros of Injustice Watch and Kelly Garcia of Injustice Watch. Phenomenal reporting, if I do say so myself. Now, I noticed in the live chat some comments from one of our viewers, Andrew, here. I'm going to share with Andrew, for those of you that are not looking at the live chat, very relevant to our reporting of the story, and I don't want to cover up Ed. Kim Brown covered some of this tonight on her live stream with the guy who had a mental health crisis who was smothered to death by police in Virginia. Knowing this is even happening in Cook County, I'm utterly horrified. I myself am autistic, but I'm white. I can barely imagine what they are going through. Mount Prospect School District 57 was also really bad at providing what I needed. The only advocate I had was demoted from principal to a teacher. Physical restraint, they never did that when I was physically assaulted by classmates. I was terrified of going out at gym and recess. Shock therapy was used on both LGBTQIA people and autistic people. There was an intersection between conversion therapy and ABA founded by the same person. I don't know how it is now, but for a while, special ed seemed to have some concentration on ABA practices, which are harmful.
For those who don't know, ABA, I believe, means applied behavior analysis.
Yes, ABA isn't about counseling. It's about getting people to mimic normies, hence the reference to behavior modification. Not counseling, nothing therapeutic about it. Just comply or the beatings will continue until morale improves. Thank you, Miguel H. Wow. How's that all to unwrap tonight? So I do want to follow up now. As I mentioned earlier, I did finally hear from the Cook County Grow Grant people, Cook County Info, after a 2-week wait and us seeing that other website report on the fact that there was a lawsuit that wasn't disclosed on the Cook County's Grow Grant website. They responded to me and said, here were my questions that I posed to them. When does the Cook County Small Business Source expect to announce the referenced, quote, expanded programs? Why didn't the Cook County Small Business Source roll the applications from September of 2022 into this new expanded program? Why didn't Cook County Small Business Source announce this in the grant application delay email sent out last month in January? Who was responsible for this decision? When did the Cook County Small Business Source find out there would be additional funds available, and where will they come from? Federal funding? How is it that the Cook County Small Business Source wasn't aware in September of 2022 that more funding would be available for 2023? Fiscal spending procurement is usually planned a year in advance. So they finally got back to me. Thank you for your email. Litigation was recently filed against the county regarding the Cook County Grow Grant program. Well, yeah, that news came late after we already found that out. In order to assist small businesses as quickly as possible, we've chosen to rescind the Grow Grant program and restructure and redesign our small business grant program. That's not helping everybody as quickly as possible at all.
Yeah. No.
At all. Who've been waiting since September when they first applied. Cook County will accelerate and expand the use of ARPA funds allocated to support small business resiliency in 2023. Stay tuned for more information as we roll that out. In the meantime, please review our robust calendar of small business events and sign up for a business advising session. Please visit the events page for the most current listing of events and visit our funding opportunities page for other available resources, which are all loans. All loans. And I'm getting those solicitations, as I mentioned in a previous program, all the time.
So not going to roll those applications over into a new system.
Plus, remember when we reported on the website's report that apparently not all of the funding that was allocated by the federal government was accounted for in the amount of money that they had set aside. There was 20 million or something that, I'm forgetting the numbers. I'm bad with remembering exact numbers, but I think it was almost half, maybe a little less than half of the funds that were allocated for this. Didn't look like they were going into the Grow Grant that was supposed to give out the $10,000 grants to all the small businesses. Go back to our Tuesday, I think it was the Tuesday program we reported on it. So yeah, that's the response I got after 2 weeks, and finally, there was Channel 5 News or Channel 7 reporting on it after the website said, "Oh no, this isn't all of this this smoke and mirrors. There's a lawsuit against them because a discriminatory lawsuit because they specifically only focused on offering the grant to women, gay people, disabled people, and people of color. Which, yeah, they shouldn't have labeled it that way. They should have looked at what businesses need it. But you could also determine that probably from the zip code that we're always asked to provide, which will identify a low income community. So, there you have it. There's the follow-up on that. Andrew has another tidbit. I do have one other tidbit. The white boys who physically assaulted me said they were most likely to be police officers, according to my 8th grade yearbook. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. And by the way, Andrew, I'm a white guy. I was constantly I know people of color are more bullied by kids with racist, prejudicial tendencies who don't have parents that teach them better. But I was constantly bullied, which is probably why I have such a big mouth now. I've kind of gone to the other extreme of like, no, you're not going to fuck with me anymore. I grew up from like the meek, shy kid who didn't know how to stand up for himself or fight back. Probably that's why I'm as vocal as I am about, wanting to see fairness and equity and support the underdog causes. I don't know. Someone can analyze me if they want. So that's our show. Although I do see Ed has got something queued up backstage here to close our show with. I think you do. We would never, ever be able to leave a show that had an important historical date attached to it.
Oh, okay.
Related to pizza.
Yeah, I could do that. So once again, happy birthday to Lou Malnati's. On March 17th, 1971, yes, St. Patrick's Day, that's today.
Now you're making me hungry for pizza.
Lou Malnati opened his very first deep dish pizza restaurant in Lincolnwood, Illinois. Lou's was my very first deep dish, and it has forever influenced my love of the style. It's not necessarily the specific reason why realdeepdish.com exists, but it is definitely an inspiration
it had an
my
influence.
recipe on the site.
Certainly. In fact, when I sampled some of the pizza that you were very generously shared with me, I was reminded a little bit of with the crust and stuff of Lou Malnati's.
Yeah, it's the best example of an authentic Chicago deep dish style, and it's been relatively consistent over the years. And we had our ins and outs with the original Pizzeria Uno. It was like Pizzeria Uno and Pizzeria Due downtown were making it the old school way, but then when they got bought by a company in Boston and went and opened up all those Uno's Chicago grills, you couldn't count on consistency between the different restaurants because Uno's Chicago Grill was not making the pizza the same way. So, but Lou Malnati's has more or less been making it the same way since I remember eating it back in the 70s and 80s when I was a kid.
I wonder if they're open this late in Lincolnwood, because now you've got me jonesing for Lou Malnati's deep dish with that really crunchy crust pizza.
I don't know when they close, but today's probably a popular day to be ordering deep dish from them because it's their birthday.
Yeah. I'll check, and if I have to, I'll go to Chicago's Pizza and grab some slices of deep dish there, even though it's not the same. It's absolutely not the same. But now you've got me in a pizza mindset.
And if you'd like to learn
my eating,
and if you'd like to learn how to make Chicago style pizza at home, you can always go to realdeepdish.com. I give these recipes out for free. All the content there is free, but if you would like to make a donation to the website, there is a donation button on the site. And if you like watching Chicago Corner and you would like to support this channel, support us at patreon.com/Chicago Corner.
I think this was a great, full, robust show tonight. And I think they always are. I mean, sometimes, depending on what's happened in our lives on the side, personally, we're not always hitting all cylinders, but I don't know, man. I was motivated to really hit it out of the park tonight. Were you?
I think we had a very full show.
Yeah.
Snork Y2K says loses open until 11, so you just
11.
missed the cutoff.
Of course.
But that's okay. I mean, Saturday's another day. You get deep dish tomorrow, or if you get motivated, you can make your dough tonight.
I don't have the ingredients, but I'm going to go see my nephews tomorrow in Wilmette, and they're 5 minutes from Malnati, so maybe I'll order us dinner from there tomorrow night. This was a 3.5 hour. This is a 3.5 hour show tonight.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to go this long tonight, but there was plenty to talk about. I mean, we always have plenty to talk about, but you never know how long the conversations are going to go. I mean,
I look at it this way too. While other shows go on other nights of the week for just an hour, other YouTubers across the ecosystem will usually, Jimmy Dore goes long, but Jimmy Dore's, got the infrastructure to do that every night. Mm-hmm. We don't, but I do think that, we try to be as comprehensive as we can, aside from the Walgreens story. Kathy, I know we'll look into that, to cover the important stuff in the news cycle. And I think everybody here also knows best places you can go for off the beaten path news is Blog Club Chicago. That's a big go-to for us when we're looking for stories that are kind of outside the regular mainstream news cycle here in Chicago.
Yep.
Andrew, yes, indeed. Everything tonight just seemed to tie together into a larger scope problem.
Yes, everything costs too much.
And I do think, too, that all the stories we cover definitely, I joke all the time. It's like, here's the perfect transition. But they are all interlinked. The cause and effect of everything happening that we talk about definitely has impact across the entire spectrum of what's happening here in Chicago. The privatization issue as it relates to law enforcement or schools. Look at we just finished with a story about a penal system with schools inside of it. It's like it's all woven together. So it all integrates with each other. Snork Y2K. I remember when we had shows 8 hours long. Who was doing 8 hour long shows? I don't think it was Chicago Corner before we came on, but
I think when they just started doing the YouTube live stream, some people basically took it on as like an 8 hour shift, full-time job type situation. So some people did live streams that long. I don't know how many actually still do that other than the continuous news channels. But it's an interesting concept if you can actually get the revenue to keep doing it, because it's hard to do 8 hours of programming, especially if you're not repeating content. Plus, you got to do all the research to get that content in the first place to deliver it and talk about it. I spend time outside the show just trying to gather stories I think we might want to talk about. I don't even get a chance to read half of them. It's just I'll see a headline, I'll read a couple paragraphs, and I'll go, okay, that's probably something we may need to cover or keep an eye on. And then I hope that we get a chance to read a little more before we go live. But sometimes we're reading it live right as you're listening to it.
Yeah. Kathy shares an addition regarding the early voting and stuff. If you're not registered to vote, don't worry. You can register at the polling place by providing 2 forms of ID. At least one ID must list your current address. To which, yes, very, very good point, Andrew. How does that work for those without a place to live or most impacted? Kathy, yep, a deep hellhole in Chicago for many. Andrew, a deep hellhole indeed. Interesting too, Snork. It was an after-hour show after another show. We've often talked about doing an after show where we can just go off in directions and in the weeds. But as it gets late and I don't eat dinner before the show because we're doing prep and stuff. I got to go forage for food now, which I'm not complaining about. I know that Chicago's Pizza's open until midnight. I can drive over and grab a couple slices as opposed to buying a whole pie, which I don't. I'm trying to I said, watch the meeting.
I know I like it when I have the opportunity to actually hand off a few slices to you before you get home, so you actually have something to eat before the stream's over. Because
with traffic,
I know you get to the end of the show, and a lot of times you don't eat before the show, and it's like he's starving, and I'm talking about food, and I'm like, sorry, Jerry, but I'm a foodie. I talk about food.
Yeah, is this what you're talking about? Is this what you're talking about, Ed?
Yeah, kind of.
So before we depart and wish everybody to have a very, very safe St. Patrick's Day weekend. Kathy appreciated the Chon. I'll give you one more for the road, Kathy. And na 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 na. Hey, hey, goodbye. All right, everybody, that's our show. We will be back on Tuesday, hopefully, and next Friday, hopefully. And we will have more to share in those future broadcasts as things evolve here at Chicago Corner, as well as in the local news cycle. In the meantime, we're very, very grateful for all of your support, all of your interaction in the live chat, for everything we do here. We're very grateful that you guys feel that we are valuable, providing a service to the city. I see what we do here as our civic activism, and it's great to have a platform to speak, talk, share ideas, even if we don't always agree, and also interact with our fellow Chicagoans. So, Ed, anything you want to share there?
Pretty much covered it. And you can always find out our latest updates at chicagocornertv.com
and on Twitter.
Yep. And we I think we have links to all the charities and stuff and helpful links.
It's a great website that Ed designed. Yeah. I can't say enough about how we're able to not only have the rotational history of our recent shows, but also, most importantly, reference the charitable organizations across the city of Chicago that we hope people can get involved with, that we feel are actually providing some impact to help people. So that's always been an important part of our website. So without further ado, Ed, as always, good to see you tonight. I'm going to take us off the air until next Tuesday. Join us then. In the meantime, as you go into the weekend, please watch out for each other, stay safe, be vigilant, and remember, if it's happening on the streets, you'll hear about it here on Chicago Corner. I wish you adieu. I wish you a safe weekend. As always, stay safe, Chicago. Signing off.
Get out. And don't come back until you've redeemed yourselves.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.